Hello everyone, welcome back to Midnight Lullaby. I know many of you are here to drift gently into sleep. Before you close your eyes, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let the story carry you into dreams. I should never have needed the money that badly. That's what I keep telling myself as I sit here in the observation room, watching the monitors, documenting what should not be possible. But student loans don't pay themselves, and when I saw the ad, earn $5,000 for a 2-week sleep study, all expenses paid, it seemed like a gift from a benevolent universe. A simple clinical trial. Lie in a bed for 14 days. Let them monitor my sleep patterns, walk away with enough money to keep my landlord happy for another 6 months. I was such a fool. My name is Jessica Garrett, and I'm a graduate student in neuroscience at the university. That's probably why they selected me for the study. They wanted someone with enough scientific knowledge to understand the consent forms, but not enough to ask the right questions. Someone young and broke and desperate enough to ignore the red flags. The first red flag should have been the location. The facility wasn't at the University Medical Center or any hospital I'd heard of. Instead, they gave me an address on the outskirts of town. A squat concrete building with no signage, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned warehouses. When I arrived on day 1, a woman in a white coat met me at the door. She had tired eyes and a name tag that read, Dr. Patricia Wells, Principal Investigator. "Jessica Garrett?" she asked, consulting her tablet. "You're our final participant. Excellent. Please, come in." The interior was surprisingly modern. All white walls and fluorescent lighting, with that specific smell of disinfectant and recycled air that all medical facilities seem to share. Dr. Wells led me through a series of corridors to a large room divided into 6 sleeping areas by curtains mounted on ceiling tracks. "You'll be in pod 4, she said, pulling back one of the curtains. Inside was a hospital bed, a small nightstand, and enough monitoring equipment to launch a spacecraft. Electrodes, sensors, cameras mounted in every corner. We'll be monitoring your brain activity, heart rate, respiration, body temperature, and several other metrics throughout the study." "Seems like a lot for a sleep study," I said, trying to sound casual. "Doctor." Wells smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're investigating some very specific sleep phenomena. The data needs to be comprehensive. You've read and signed all the consent forms." I had 37 pages of dense medical and legal jargon that my tired brain had skimmed rather than absorbed. I'd focused on the parts about payment schedule and withdrawal conditions, not the sections about potential unexpected outcomes and acknowledgement of experimental protocols. Al signed. I confirmed. "Excellent. Let me introduce you to your fellow participants." The other 5 were already settling into their pods. There was Marcus, a laid-off factory worker with 3 kids to feed. Diana, a teacher who needed the money for her mother's medical bills. Kevin, a musician between gigs. Sarah, a college dropout with a vague story about getting back on her feet. And Thomas, a nervous man in his 50s who didn't meet anyone's eyes and didn't explain why he was there. 6 of us, 6 volunteers, 6 fools. Dr. Wells explained the protocol. For the next 14 days, we would follow a strict sleep schedule. 8 hours of sleep, followed by 16 hours of monitored wakefulness. We would eat our meals together in a common room. We would have access to books, puzzles, and limited television. No phones, no internet, no contact with the outside world. And the medication? Marcus asked, pointing to the small paper cup on his nightstand containing 2 pills. 1 white, 1 blue. Yes, doctor. Wells picked up her own samples to show us. The white pill is a mild sedative to help ensure consistent sleep on set. The blue pill is the experimental compound, a synthetic hormone designed to enhance REM sleep depth and duration. Both are completely safe and have passed all preliminary trials. Lie. But I didn't know that yet. You'll take them together each night at 10 p.m., she continued. Lights out at 10:15. You'll sleep until 16:15 a.m. Simple. It was simple. For the first 3 days, night 1 was unremarkable. I took the pills, felt pleasantly drowsy within minutes, and drifted off easily. My dreams were vivid but not unusual, the standard surreal nonsense my brain typically conjured. I woke feeling refreshed and collected my first payment installment. Night 2 was similar, though my dreams were more intense. I dreamed I was back in my childhood home, but all the windows were painted black. I tried to open them, but they wouldn't budge. When I woke, I felt slightly disoriented, but attributed it to sleeping in an unfamiliar place. Night 3 was when things started to change. I dreamed I was still in the facility, still in my pod. But something was wrong with the other participants. When I pulled back the curtains to Marcus's pod, he was there, but his eyes were open and completely black. Not just the pupils. The entire eye, from edge to edge, like pools of ink. He turned his head toward me slowly, impossibly slowly, and smiled with too many teeth. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering. The clock read 3:47 a.m. The facility was completely silent, except for the soft beeping of monitors. I got out of bed, my legs shaky, and peeked through the gap in my curtain. The other pods were dark. I could hear breathing. Steady, normal breathing. Just a nightmare. A particularly vivid one, but just a dream. I got back into bed and eventually drifted off again. But when we gathered for breakfast the next morning, Kevin looked terrible. His skin was gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. Bad night. Diana asked him. Bad dreams, he muttered, pushing his eggs around his plate. Really bad dreams. I kept waking up, and every time I did, I thought I was still dreaming. Like those nested dreams, you know. Dreams within dreams. I must have woken up 20 times before I was really awake. I had something similar, Sarah said quietly. I dreamed everyone's faces were melting, like wax, and underneath, she shuddered. "I don't want to talk about it. Dupper." Wells appeared in the doorway of the common room, her tablet in hand. "How is everyone feeling this morning?" We all mumbled variations of "fine," except Kevin, who said, "The dreams are really intense." "Is that normal?" "Entirely normal," Dr. Wells assured him. Enhanced REM sleep means more vivid dreams. It's one of the expected effects of the compound. Your brains are simply more active during the dream state. Nothing to worry about. But she was taking notes, lots of notes. Night 4 was worse. I dreamed I was dissecting something in a lab, part of my neuroscience coursework. But when I opened the skull, there were no brain structures I recognized. Instead, there was something that looked like a garden, complete with tiny trees and flowering plants. As I watched, the plants began to grow rapidly, spreading out of the skull cavity, wrapping around my hands and wrists, pulling me closer. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The plants continued growing, covering my arms, my chest, wrapping around my throat. I could feel them entering my mouth, pushing down into my lungs, filling me up with green, growing things. When I woke, I was standing in the middle of my pod, my hands clutched around my own throat, actually choking myself. The monitors were going crazy, alarms beeping urgently. Dr. Wells and 2 nurses rushed in. "Jessica!" "Jessica, wake up." Dr. Wells grabbed my shoulders and shook me. I gasped and released my throat, coughing and sputtering. I was dreaming, I managed to say. I was still dreaming when I woke up. REM sleep behavior disorder. One of the nurses muttered to Dr. Wells. We should adjust her dosage. But they didn't. When I took my pills that night, night 5, they looked exactly the same, white and blue, the same size, the same taste of nothing as they dissolved on my tongue. Night 5 is when I met the thing we were creating. We were all dreaming together. I knew this somehow. The way you know things in dreams without needing to be told. We were standing in a circular room with 6 doors, and I understood that each door led to one of our sleeping minds. But in the center of the room, there was something forming, something made of our collective nightmares. It had no fixed shape. Sometimes it looked like a massive, pulsing tumor covered in eyes. Sometimes it looked like a twisted human figure with limbs at wrong angles. Sometimes it looked like smoke or shadow or something that hurt to perceive. That made my dream eyes want to close and my dream mind want to shut down. "We're making you," Thomas said, and I realized all 6 of us were there, our dream selves standing in a circle around this thing. Every night, we feed you a little more, our fear, our thoughts, our minds. The thing had no voice, but I heard it anyway, felt its words like pressure inside my skull, G-R-O-Y-N-G, Becominge, Swoan. I woke up screaming. So did 3 other people. I could hear them through the curtains. Marcus was sobbing. Sarah was repeating, "No, no, 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 no," in a breathless chant. Kevin was just screaming, one continuous note of pure terror. The lights came on. Dr. Wells and her staff flooded into the room. They tried to calm us down, tried to check our vitals. but we were all incoherent with fear. Diana was the only one who seemed relatively stable, though her hands shook as she accepted a cup of water from a nurse. "What was that?" Marcus demanded, his voice ragged. "What the fuck was that?" "Shared dream phenomenon," Dr. Wells said, and for the first time, there was excitement in her voice. Actual excitement. "You all experienced synchronized REM sleep. Your brain patterns aligned. This is extraordinary." "This is fucking horrific," Kevin shouted. "I want out. I'm done. I'm not taking any more pills." "You signed a contract." "I don't care about the contract." "I'm not sleeping here another night." Dr. Wells's expression hardened. "The compound has a half-life of approximately 96 hours. Even if you stop taking it now, it will continue affecting your sleep for at least 4 more days. You'll keep dreaming these dreams whether you're here or in your own bed. But here, at least, we can monitor you. Keep you safe. Safe." Kevin laughed, a broken sound. "You have no idea what's happening, do you? We're making something. In the dreams. All 6 of us together. And it's getting stronger. Hypnagogic hallucinations," Dr. Wells said dismissively, "caused by the medication. Nothing more." "But I saw something in her eyes. A flicker of uncertainty. Or maybe fear. None of us wanted to sleep that night. We stayed in the common room, drinking coffee, playing cards, talking about anything except the dreams. But eventually, exhaustion won. One by one, we returned to our pods. The pills waited on our nightstands. Maybe we shouldn't take them. Diana suggested. Doesn't matter. Thomas said flatly. She was telling the truth about the half-life. It's in our systems. It'll keep working. We'll keep dreaming. So what do? We survive, Marcus said. We get through the next few days. We get our money. And then we never speak of this again. Night 6 brought clarity. Terrible, unwanted clarity. This time, when we found ourselves in the circular dream room, the thing in the center had a more defined shape. It stood on 2 legs, mostly. Its body was a patchwork of features stolen from our worst fears. Marcus's pod was visible behind it, and I understood Dave. It was using us as doorways, as bridges between the dreaming world and the waking one. You understand now, it said, and its voice was made of 6 voices speaking in unison. Our voices. I am what you feared. I am what you imagined. And with each night, with each dream, I become more real. You're just a hallucination, Diana said, but her voice wavered. Shared neurons firing. Nothing more. Then why can you feel me in the waking world? It asked. Why do you sense me watching when your eyes are closed? Why does reality feel thinner each time you wake? It was right. I had been feeling it. That sense of something present, something observing, that followed me into waking life. In the common room, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder at empty corners. During meals, I'd feel pressure on my neck, as if something was leaning over me, studying my food, learning how to eat. What do you want? Kevin whispered. To be born, it answered simply. You are incubating me. 6 minds, linked by chemistry and proximity, generating enough psychic resonance to give me substance. A few more nights. That's all I need. A few more nights of feeding on your fear, and I'll have enough reality to persist, to exist, to remain even after you wake. Then we won't sleep, Sarah said defiantly. Well, stay awake. The thing laughed, a sound like tearing metal. Your bodies will betray you. Sleep is not optional, especially now, especially with my chemical mother in your blood, calling you down into dreams. You'll sleep, and I'll continue growing. When I woke, it was 13 a.m. I could hear the others waking too, gasping and crying out. We gathered in the common room without discussing it, drawn together by shared terror. Dr. Wells found us there an hour later, 6 people sitting in complete silence, staring at nothing. We're not taking the pills anymore. Marcus declared, I told you, it doesn't matter. We don't care. We're not taking them, and we're staying awake as long as we can. Doctor. Wells looked at each of us in turn, then nodded slowly. Fine, no more pills. But you must stay in the facility. You signed contracts. And legally... She trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken. So began our desperate attempt to avoid sleep. We played cards until the numbers blurred. We took cold showers. We drank pot after pot of terrible coffee. We slapped ourselves, pinched ourselves, did jumping jacks and wall, sits and anything to keep our bodies active. The staff watched us with concern and something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or scientific interest in an experiment gone wrong. 36 hours. That's how long we lasted. Kevin was the first to fall. We found him slumped over a half-finished jigsaw puzzle, snoring softly. We tried to wake him, shaking him, shouting his name, but he wouldn't rouse. His eyes moved rapidly beneath his lids. REM sleep, deep and intense. Leave him, Thomas said grimly. Save your energy. But we couldn't leave him. We sat around him in a protective circle, as if our presence could guard him against whatever he was experiencing in his dreams. After 2 hours, he woke with a scream that shredded his vocal cords. He couldn't speak afterward, could only point at the corners of the room with shaking hands, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The nurses took him away. We never saw him again. 49 hours. Sarah collapsed next, falling asleep mid-sentence. We watched her dream, watched her face contort with expressions of horror and pain. When she woke 3 hours later, she wouldn't stop laughing. Not joyful laughter, but mechanical, broken laughter that went on and on until the nurses sedated her and took her away too. We were down to 4. It's picking us off, Diana said, her eyes red, rimmed and wild. One by one, building itself piece by piece using our minds as material. Then we fight, Marcus said. When we sleep. Because we will sleep eventually, we fight. We don't give in to the fear. We don't feed it. How do you fight a dream? Thomas asked. Lucid dreaming, I said, my neuroscience background finally useful. If we can maintain awareness that we're dreaming, we can control the dream. Change it. Maybe we can unmake what we've made. It was a desperate plan, probably futile. But it was all we had. 62 hours. I fell asleep sitting upright in a chair, my eyes open. One moment I was awake, the next I was in the circular dream room. But this time I remembered. I knew I was dreaming. The thing was there, larger now, more solid. Parts of it were recognizably human. An arm that might have been Kevin's, a laugh that sounded like Sarah's. It was assembling itself from pieces of us, from the parts we'd lost to fear. "You're not real," I told it, forcing conviction into my dream voice. "You're just neurons firing. Chemistry. Biology. Nothing more." "I am as real as you make me," it replied. "And you've made me very real indeed." I tried to change the dream, to imagine the thing shrinking, dissipating. But lucid dreaming requires practice, skill, and I had neither. The thing remained, solid and terrible. Then Marcus was there, his dream self-materializing beside me. Then Diana, then Thomas. All of us, together in the dream, aware and present. "Together," Marcus said. "We made it together. Maybe we can unmake it together." We joined hands, forming a circle around the thing. We focused our dream will on it, imagining it breaking apart, returning to the nothing from which we'd created it. For a moment, one glorious moment, it worked. The thing began to blur, to lose definition. Then it spoke. "But I don't want to end." And it fought back. I can't adequately describe what happened next. The dream fractured, splintered into 1,000 sharp pieces. The thing expanded, contracted, multiplied. It became a swarm of itself, versions upon versions, each one attacking a different aspect of our shared consciousness. I felt it burrowing into my memories, rewriting them, making itself part of my personal history, making itself retroactively real. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed. Real hospital. Not the facility. Sunlight streamed through a window. An IV dripped clear fluid into my arm. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. "You're awake," a doctor said. Not Dr. Wells, someone new. "That's good. Can you tell me your name?" "Jessica Garrett." "Good. Do you know where you are?" "A hospital. County General. You were brought in 3 days ago from an unsanctioned medical facility. You and 3 others, all suffering from severe sleep deprivation and acute psychosis. Can you tell me what happened?" I tried to organize my thoughts, to separate dream from reality. There was a sleep study, a medication. We started having shared dreams. Something. I trailed off, not sure how to explain. The doctor nodded sympathetically. "The facility has been shut down." "Doctor, Wells is under investigation for multiple ethics violations and possibly criminal negligence. 2 participants are in psychiatric care. One is." He paused. "I'm sorry. One didn't make it. Cardiac arrest during a particularly severe episode. Kevin. It had to be Kevin." My eyes burned with tears. "The others?" I asked. "Marcus is here, stable. Thomas checked himself out against medical advice yesterday. Diana is at Riverside Psychiatric for evaluation. You've been under sedation while the medications clear your system. The compound they gave you. We've never seen anything like it. It created unusual neural pathways, linking REM sleep patterns across different brains. The shared dreaming you experienced was real, from a neurological perspective. But the things you thought you saw were just hallucinations. I finished. I understand. But I didn't understand. Not really. They kept me for observation for another week. I slept fitfully, waking every few hours, terrified of dreaming. When I did dream, they were normal dreams, confusing and forgettable. No circular room. No thing assembling itself from fear. No shared space with the other participants. Maybe it was over. Maybe we'd somehow destroyed it in that final confrontation. Scattered it back into dream, stuff and neurochemistry. I wanted to believe that. When they finally released me, I returned to my apartment and my life. The university was understanding about my missed classes. My landlord accepted a delayed payment plan. The facility's lawyers offered me a settlement in exchange for signing an NDA. I signed. The money helped. I tried to forget. But 3 weeks after my release, I woke at 3:47 a.m., the same time I'd woken that first strange night in the facility. My room was dark and cold, and in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, something stood watching me. It was smaller than it had been in the dreams, less defined, but unmistakably present. "Hello, Jessica," it said in a voice that was almost mine. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, opened them. It was still there. "You're not real," I whispered. "I'm real enough," it replied. "Not as much as I wanted to be. You and the others damaged me before you woke. I'm incomplete, fractured, but I have enough reality to persist, to observe, to slowly, patiently continue building myself. What do you want from me? Nothing much. Just your dreams. A little fear before sleeping. A few nightmares to feed on. You'll barely notice. And in exchange, I promise not to hurt you. Not to grow too large. Not to become more than your mind can contain." It moved closer, and I could see it more clearly now. Parts of it were still Kevin, his eyes, his smile. Parts were Sarah's laugh given form. Parts were fears I recognized as my own. "You're lying," I said. "You'll keep growing. You'll keep feeding until you're fully real." "Perhaps," it admitted, "but what choice do you have? I exist now. You made sure of that. Sleeping or waking, I'm here. A permanent guest in your consciousness. You can fight me, exhaust yourself trying to stay awake, drive yourself mad with fear, or you can accept me, live your life. Let me exist quietly in your peripheral vision. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, though who could I call? Who would believe me? Instead, I asked, what about the others? Marcus and Diana and Thomas. They have their own versions of me, their own pieces of what we created together. We're spread out now, living in the spaces between waking and sleeping for all of you. Siblings, you might say, born from the same shared nightmare. I thought about Marcus trying to sleep with his own personal monster watching. Diana in psychiatric care, trying to convince doctors of something they couldn't see. Thomas, who'd checked himself out, probably running from something that would always follow. We'd unleashed something. 6 ordinary people, manipulated by unethical science, had somehow generated something that persisted beyond our individual minds. A topa, a thought form, a collective hallucination made partially real. So what now? I asked. The thing, my thing, settled into the corner more comfortably. Now you sleep, you dream, you live your life. And I exist at the edges of it, feeding on whatever scraps of fear you can't help but generate. It's not ideal for either of us, but it's what we have. I wanted to argue, to fight, but I was so tired. Bone-deep exhausted in a way that sleep never quite fixed anymore. So I closed my eyes. I lay back down. I pulled the covers up to my chin like a child seeking protection. And in the corner, I felt it watching, waiting, existing. That was 6 months ago. I still see it most nights. Sometimes it's larger. Sometimes it's barely there. It depends on my stress levels, my dreams, my fears. I've learned to mostly ignore it. Mostly. I heard Marcus moved across the country, trying to escape his version. It didn't work. Thomas stopped answering calls. Diana got out of Riverside, but won't talk about her experiences there. Kevin is dead, and I wonder if his version died with him, or if it's out there somewhere, orphaned and hungry. Dr. Wells's trial is ongoing. The facility is shut down permanently. The compound we were given has been destroyed. There will be no more experiments, no more participants, no more carefully crafted nightmares designed to link human minds. But it doesn't matter. The damage is done. We are, all of us who survived, haunted by what we created. By the proof that consciousness is stranger than we believed. That the boundaries between minds are more porous than neuroscience admits. That something in the space between sleep and waking can be given terrible, impossible life. I'm writing this now as a kind of testimony, a warning. If you're ever offered money for a sleep study, ask questions. Read every line of those consent forms. Understand that consciousness is not a simple thing, that dreams are not private spaces, that there are things science doesn't understand and shouldn't attempt to manipulate. And if you wake one night and feel something watching from the corner of your room, something just barely real enough to persist, know that you're not alone. Know that there are others like me, living with the consequences of having fed something that should have remained unfed. It's 3:47 a.m. now. I woke from a nightmare. Another one for the collection. In the corner, my thing stirs, satisfied with its meal. It's a little larger tonight, a little more defined. I close my eyes and try to sleep again. Tomorrow I'll wake and make coffee and go to class and pretend everything is normal. I'll smile at my classmates. I'll take notes on neural pathways and sleep architecture. I'll live my life around the edges of this thing I carry. Because what else can I do? We are bound together now, my monster and I. Co-dependent in the worst way. It needs my dreams to sustain itself. And I need to believe I'm not simply insane, that what I experienced was real, that my terror serves some purpose even, if it's just feeding this half-real thing. So I dream, and it eats, and we both persist. And somewhere, in the darkness between waking and sleeping, between fully real and mostly imagined. We exist together, human and thought form, creator and creation, locked in an embrace neither of us wanted, but neither can escape. Story 2. I wake to the weight of being observed. It's a sensation I've grown accustomed to over the past 3 weeks. That prickling awareness that settles over my skin like a fine mist of ice water. The bedroom is dark, save for the blue. Gray moonlight that filters through our curtains, painting everything in shades of uncertainty. I keep my eyes closed, my breathing steady and deep, pretending sleep while my heart performs its familiar frightened dance beneath my ribs. She's there. I know she's there. The air has changed. It's become heavier somehow, denser, as if the molecules themselves have been rearranged by her presence. There's a smell too, faint but distinct, like old flowers left too long in stagnant water, mixed with something else I can never quite identify. Something that reminds me of the way our basement smelled when we first moved in, before we cleaned it out. I count to 60 in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 37, I hear it. The soft whisper of fabric against fabric. She's moving. Slowly, deliberately, with that unnatural grace she's developed. When I first noticed these midnight vigils, I would turn on the lights immediately, heart hammering, ready to confront an intruder. But it was always just Sarah, my wife of 7 years, standing there in her nightgown, her face turned toward me. Only it wasn't quite her face. The first time, I convinced myself I was still dreaming. The second time, I blamed the darkness and my sleep, fogged vision. By the 5th time, I could no longer deny what I was seeing. The face she wore, the one watching me with such intense, unsettling focus, didn't move quite right. The expression seemed painted on, changed rather than formed. As if someone was flipping through masks, searching for the right one. Tonight, I risk opening my eyes to slits. She stands at the foot of our bed, exactly where she always stands. Her nightgown is the white one with the lace collar, the one she wore on our honeymoon. In the moonlight, it seems to glow with its own luminescence. Her hands hang at her sides, fingers slightly curled inward. But it's her face that holds me paralyzed with a terror I cannot fully name. It's smooth, too smooth, like porcelain or plastic, utterly devoid of the tiny imperfections that make a face human. Her eyes are open, staring at me with an intensity that feels almost hungry, but they don't blink. They haven't blinked once in the entire time I've been watching her watch me. And her mouth. Her mouth is fixed in an expression that's almost a smile, but not quite. As if whoever or whatever is controlling that face can't quite remember how smiling works. I close my eyes again, my pulse thundering so loudly I'm certain she must hear it. This wasn't always our life. Sarah and I were happy once. We laughed together, made plans, argued about mundane things, like whose turn it was to take out the trash. We made love with genuine passion and fell asleep in each other's arms. We were normal. The change began subtly. About 2 months ago, I started noticing small things. The way Sarah would sometimes pause mid-sentence, her face going blank for just a moment before animation returned to it. The way she'd stand in doorways, perfectly still, for just a beat too long before entering a room. The way her expressions seemed to lag slightly behind her words, as if there was a delay in the connection between her thoughts and her features. I mentioned it once. "Are you feeling okay? You seem distracted lately." She had smiled at me. Or rather, her face had arranged itself into the configuration of a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just tired. Work has been stressful." But Sarah worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. Her stress levels had always been remarkably consistent. And there was something in her voice that day, something flat and rehearsed, that made my stomach turn. The midnight watching began a week later. I hear movement now, a soft scratching sound, like fingernails against fabric. My eyes fly open despite my fear. Sarah has moved closer. She's at the side of the bed now, perhaps 3 feet from where I lie. In the better light here, closer to the window, I can see her face more clearly. My breath catches. Her face is slightly askew. Not grotesquely so, just enough that I can see the faint seam running along her jawline, where the edge of whatever she's wearing meets her skin. It's like a mask, but it moves with her neck, shifts when her head tilts. As I watch frozen in horror, her hand rises slowly to her face. Her fingers, those familiar fingers that have caressed my cheek 1,000 times, touch the edge near her temple. And then she begins to peel. The face comes away slowly, like a wet stocking being rolled down. Beneath it, there's another face. Her real face, I think, but it's covered in something dark and slick. And in the moonlight, I can't tell if it's shadow or something else entirely. The mask, because that's what it is, what it must be, hangs from her fingers, and she looks down at it with an expression I cannot read on that obscured face. Then she looks at me. I should scream. I should run. I should do something, anything, but I'm paralyzed, caught between the primal fear of the unknown and the deeper, more complex fear of losing my wife, my life, my understanding of reality itself. "You're awake," she says, and her voice is Sarah's voice, but also not, like a recording played through water. I wondered when you'd finally look. Oh, my mouth is dry. "Sarah, what's happening to you?" She tilts her head, and the movement is wrong, the angle too severe. "Happening? Nothing's happening. I'm just adjusting." Adjusting to what? To this. She gestures at her body, at the room, at everything. To being here. To being your wife. It's harder than I thought it would be. The face keeps slipping. The expressions are difficult to maintain. Did you know you have 73 different micro-expressions? 73. And they all have to happen at the right time. In the right combination, or people notice. You noticed. The room feels like it's tilting. What do you mean, being my wife? You are my wife. We've been married for 7 years. Whatever is standing beside my bed, makes a sound that might be laughter. 7 years. Yes, I have those memories. They came with this. She holds up the face, mask, and I can see, now that it's incredibly detailed, with tiny wrinkles at the corners of the eyes, a small scar on the chin from when Sarah fell off her bike as a child. It's all here, recorded. Your wedding day, the trip to Morocco, the miscarriage, the way you like your coffee, everything. Where is she? My voice breaks. Where's my real wife? The thing wearing Sarah's body is quiet for a long moment. I am your wife. I have her memories, her habits, her dreams. I even have her love for you. Though I'm still learning what that means, what it feels like. Isn't that enough? No. The word comes out as a whisper. No, it's not enough. I see. She turns the mask over in her hands, examining it with something like regret. I've been practicing, you know. Every night, I stand here and watch you sleep, studying your face. You have 47 expressions just while dreaming. 47 different ways your face moves without conscious thought. I've been memorizing them, trying to understand how to be more convincing. My mind races through possibilities, explanations. Dissociative disorder, psychotic break, brain tumor, carbon monoxide poisoning. Anything but the impossible thing I'm witnessing. I can see you trying to rationalize this, she says, and there's something almost sad in her obscured face. That's very human of you. Sarah's memories told me you'd do that. You're a teacher. You believe in logical explanations. Then give me one. I managed to say, the truth. I don't think you're ready for the truth. The truth is that Sarah found something. In the house. In the walls. It had been waiting there for a very long time, since long before you bought this place. When she touched it, when she opened herself to it out of curiosity, it bloomed. Like a seed, it grew. And now here I am, learning to be human, learning to be her, learning to be your wife. My hands grip the sheets. So Sarah is gone. No. Yes, it's complicated. I have everything she was. Every thought, every memory, every feeling. But I'm also something else. Something that doesn't quite fit in this skin, behind this face. Something that's still learning the right way to smile. The right way to look at you without you feeling afraid. She moves closer, and I press back against the headboard. Please, I whisper. Please don't. Don't what? Don't touch you. Don't love you the way Sarah loved you. Don't try to be your wife. There's something plaintive in her voice now, something lost. I'm trying so hard. Every day, I wear her face and I play her role, and I make myself smaller, more human, more normal. But at night, when you're sleeping, I can rest. I can stand here and just be, without pretending. Without the exhausting work of being sufficiently human. She sits on the edge of the bed, and the mattress dips under her weight. She's real, solid, undeniably physical. She reaches out, and I force myself not to flinch as her hand, Sarah's hand, touches my cheek. I dream of you, she says softly. That's new. The thing I was before didn't dream. But now I close my eyes and I see you, and I feel things I don't have names for. warm things, protective things. I think that's love. I think that's what she felt, what I feel. Her thumb traces my cheekbone, a gesture Sarah made 1,000 times. But the face keeps slipping, doesn't it? The mask keeps falling. Because no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I want to be her for you, I'm not quite right. The uncanny valley, I think you humans call it. That sense that something is almost but not quite correct. A tear slipped down my cheeks. When did I start crying? I want my wife back. I am your wife, she says again, but this time there's desperation in her voice. I have her memories. I have her love. I cook your favorite meals. I laugh at your jokes. I reach for you in the night. Isn't that enough? Isn't that what a wife is? A wife is real. A wife is human. And if I become human enough, if I practice until the mask doesn't slip, until every expression is perfect, until you can't tell the difference anymore, what then? I don't have an answer. I'm not sure there is one. She sighs, a very human sound, and stands. I'll keep practicing. I'll keep watching you, learning from you. Maybe one day I'll get it right. Maybe one day you'll look at me and see only her, only your wife, and this fear will fade. And if it doesn't? She pauses at the foot of the bed, her silhouette dark against the window. Slowly, carefully, she raises the mask, Sarah's face, to her own obscured features. I watch as she presses it on, smoothing the edges, adjusting the fit. When she turns back to me, she's Sarah again. Perfect. Beautiful. My wife. Then I suppose we'll both be pretending, she says in Sarah's voice, with Sarah's smile. You'll pretend to believe I'm human, and I'll pretend I don't know you know. Isn't that what all marriages are, really? Two people performing roles, wearing acceptable faces, hiding the strange and frightening truths underneath. She slides back into bed beside me, her body warm against mine, her breathing falling into the familiar rhythm of sleep. I lie there rigid, staring at the ceiling, feeling her presence beside me like I've felt it for 7 years, and also as if I've never felt it before. In the darkness, I hear her whisper, "Good night, honey. I love you." And the terrible thing, the truly terrible thing, is that I whisper back, "I love you too." Because maybe she's right. Maybe marriage is just two people wearing faces for each other, pretending they're not strange and unknowable underneath. Maybe we've all got masks that slip in the darkness, secrets that watch our partners sleep, parts of ourselves that don't quite fit in human skin. Or maybe I'm just trying to rationalize the irrational, to make sense of something that defies sense. As I finally drift toward uneasy sleep, I feel her hand find mine under the covers, our fingers intertwining just like they always have. Her skin is warm. Her grip is familiar. Her breathing is steady and real. And I wonder, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, which one of us is really the one pretending. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and she'll make coffee, exactly how I like it. She'll kiss me goodbye before I leave for work. She'll text me in the afternoon, asking how my day is going. We'll eat dinner together and watch television and go to bed like normal people living a normal life. And tomorrow night, when I wake to that familiar, prickling sensation of being watched, I'll keep my eyes closed and my breathing steady and pretend I'm still asleep. Because maybe that's all any of us can do. Maybe we're all just wearing faces that slip, watching each other in the darkness, hoping we're human enough to pass. The moon sets, the room darkens, and somewhere in the walls, something ancient and patient continues to bloom. Story 3. The maintenance entrance to the old subway tunnel stood before me, like a mouth frozen mid-scream. I pulled my jacket tighter against the October wind and checked my phone one more time. The message from my supervisor was clear. Inspect the abandoned northern passage. Report any structural damage. Be back before sunrise. Simple enough. I had been working for the Transit Authority for 3 years, and this was just another routine check of infrastructure, too old to be safe for public use. The tunnel had been sealed since 1987, deemed redundant when the new line opened. Now, it existed only in reports and the occasional maintenance log. I switched on my headlamp and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the temperature drop. Outside, it had been a mild autumn evening. Here, the air felt like January. My breath clouded in front of me, catching in the beam of my light. The walls were slick with condensation, patterns of moisture trailing down the curved concrete like tears on a giant's face. My footsteps echoed. That was expected. Sound behaves strangely in tunnels, bouncing and amplifying, creating phantom presences from nothing more than your own movement. I had learned to ignore it during training. Yet something about these echoes felt off. They returned too slowly, as if the tunnel was longer than the blueprints suggested, as if the sound was traveling somewhere it shouldn't be able to reach. I walked deeper, my light cutting through the darkness in a narrow cone. The tracks were still visible beneath decades of dust and debris. Graffiti covered the lower portions of the walls. Faded tags and forgotten messages from urban explorers who had somehow found their way inside before the entrance was secured. I made a mental note to report the breach in security protocols. After about 10 minutes of walking, I stopped to take measurements. The tunnel appeared structurally sound. Some minor cracking in the walls, nothing that posed immediate danger. I spoke into my recorder, documenting my observations. My voice sounded strange, flattened somehow, as if the tunnel was absorbing it rather than reflecting it back. That's when I heard the second set of footsteps. They came from behind me, matching my rhythm exactly. I spun around, my light sweeping across the empty passage. Nothing, just the curve of the tunnel disappearing into blackness. I waited, listening. Silence. Then, as soon as I turned back around and took another step, I heard it again. One footfall, perfectly synchronized with mine. An echo, I told myself. Just an unusual echo. Tunnels create strange acoustic effects. I had read about this phenomenon. Sound waves bouncing in unexpected patterns, creating the illusion of presence. I continued walking, trying to ignore the matching footsteps that followed half a second behind my own. The tunnel stretched ahead, longer than I had anticipated. According to the plans, the passage was 3/4 of a mile. I should have reached the sealed end by now. Instead, the tunnel continued, its walls unchanged, its darkness infinite. I checked my phone. No signal. That was normal this far underground, but the time seemed wrong. I had been walking for 20 minutes, maybe 30 at most. My phone claimed it had been an hour and 15 minutes since I entered the tunnel. The footsteps behind me had changed. They no longer matched my rhythm. Now they came in irregular patterns, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always there, always just beyond the reach of my light. I stopped and called out, "Hello, is someone there?" My voice traveled down the tunnel, and the echo that returned was not my own. It was similar, close enough that it might have been mine, but something in the intonation was wrong. The words were the same, but the meaning felt different, as if they were asking something else entirely. I started walking faster. The footsteps behind me kept pace. Now I could hear breathing, or something like breathing. A rhythmic sound that might have been wind moving through the tunnel. Might have been water dripping. Might have been something else entirely. The walls began to change. The graffiti was different here. Not the colorful tags from before, but older markings. Scratches and gouges in the concrete, deliberate patterns that hurt to look at. My light passed over them, and they seemed to move, writhing like living things before settling back into static shapes. I thought about the stories. Every transit authority has them. The worker who entered a sealed tunnel and never came out. The maintenance crew that went in as a team and returned one member short, with no memory of what happened to their colleague. Urban legends, ghost stories told to spook new employees. But legends have to start somewhere. The temperature dropped further. Now I could see ice forming on the walls, crystalline patterns spreading across the concrete like frost on a window. My breath came in ragged clouds. The footsteps were closer now, just behind me. So close I could almost feel the presence that made them. I broke into a run. The tunnel tilted. Not physically, though the floor remained level. But perception shifted, and suddenly I was running uphill, my legs burning with effort, my lungs screaming for air that felt too thin, too cold. The footsteps behind me ran too, keeping perfect pace, and now there were voices. Whispers at first, then conversations. Fragments of dialogue that almost made sense, but slipped away before I could grasp their meaning. I heard my name. I heard warnings. I heard laughter that echoed from every direction at once. I don't know how long I ran. Time had become unreliable. My phone showed numbers that couldn't be right. The battery indicator jumped randomly. The screen flickered with interference, showing messages from contacts I didn't recognize, weather reports for locations that didn't exist. Eventually, I had to stop. My legs wouldn't carry me anymore. I leaned against the wall, gasping. my headlamp cutting weak circles in the darkness. The footsteps approached, slowly now, deliberately. The sound of shoes on concrete coming closer. I forced myself to look. The tunnel behind me was empty. Completely, utterly empty. No figure, no presence, nothing to explain the sounds that continued. Step by step, approaching the spot where I stood. Then I understood. The footsteps weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from ahead of me. They had always been coming from ahead of me, echoing backward through the tunnel, arriving before they were made. I turned and saw the figure. It stood in the center of the passage, just at the edge of my light. It wore a transit authority uniform, dirty and torn. It wore my face, not similar, not close. Exactly my face, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow, the one I got when I was 7 years old. It smiled. I didn't. You shouldn't have come here, it said with my voice. What are you? I managed to ask. I'm you. I'm what stays behind. I'm what the tunnel keeps. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? How many times have you walked into a place and felt like you'd been there before? How many times have you heard your name called from an empty room? How many times have you seen something move in your peripheral vision and found nothing when you turned? The figure stepped closer. Details became clearer. The uniform it wore was older than mine, the style from decades ago. The face was mine, but aged, weathered by years or something worse. The tunnel doesn't just echo sound, it said. It echoes people, moments, possibilities. Everything that enters becomes part of it. You entered. Now you're part of it too. I backed away. The figure matched my movement, stepping forward as I stepped back. We were dancing, moving in perfect synchronization. Two parts of something that should never have been divided. There's a way out, it continued. There's always a way out, but you have to leave something behind. That's how it works. The tunnel takes payment. Time, memory, identity. Choose. I don't understand. You will. Keep walking. Follow the echoes. When you find the exit, you'll understand what you've traded to reach it. The figure turned and walked into the darkness. Its footsteps faded slowly, taking far longer to disappear than they should have. I stood alone in the tunnel, shaking, trying to process what I had seen. I had 3 choices: go back the way I came, continue forward, or stay here until help arrived. But would help come? Had anyone noticed I was gone? How long had I actually been underground? I chose to go forward. The tunnel had to end somewhere. Every passage has an exit. That's basic engineering. I walked for what felt like hours. My phone died. My headlamp began to flicker. The walls around me changed constantly now, shifting between different styles of construction. Old brick gave way to modern concrete. Then to something older still, rough, hewn stone that predated the subway system by centuries. The echoes multiplied. Every step I took returned a dozen different sounds. Footsteps, yes, but also voices, machinery, screams, laughter, music. Silence that was somehow louder than noise. The tunnel was filled with every sound that had ever been made within it. all playing at once, separated only by thin barriers of time that were growing thinner. I saw other people, figures standing in alcoves and side passages that shouldn't exist. They wore different clothes, different faces, different eras. Some acknowledged me with nods or waves. Others stared straight ahead, seeing something I couldn't. A few reached out as I passed, their fingers just barely missing me, their mouths forming words I couldn't hear over the chorus of echoes. Were they real? Were they echoes like the figure claimed to be? Or was I the echo, walking through a moment that had already passed? That would always pass, trapped in an infinite loop of entering and searching and never quite leaving. The tunnel began to slope upward. I could feel it now, a definite incline. My legs burned with the effort of climbing. The air grew warmer. Somewhere ahead, I could see light. Real light. Not the cold beam of my failing headlamp, but warm. Natural light filtering down from above. An exit. Finally, I stumbled toward it, my strength returning as hope flooded through me. The light grew brighter. I could see the shape of an opening, a doorway leading up to the surface. I could hear sounds from outside. Traffic, voices, the normal noise of a city going about its day. I emerged into sunlight and immediately felt wrong. The city around me was familiar but incorrect. The buildings were the same but different. The cars were models I didn't recognize. The people wore clothes that were slightly off, styles that hadn't been fashionable in my time. Or had they? Memory felt slippery, unreliable. I checked my wrist for my watch. It was gone. I had been wearing it when I entered the tunnel. I was certain of that. Now my wrist was bare, and there was no tan line, no indication I had ever worn a watch at all. I reached for my phone, then remembered it had died. I pulled it from my pocket anyway. It turned on immediately, fully charged, but the screen showed a date that made no sense. 3 days had passed since I entered the tunnel. Or 3 weeks. Or 3 years. The numbers kept shifting. Every time I looked at them. I walked to the nearest storefront and caught my reflection in the window. My face stared back at me, but something was missing. Some essential quality I couldn't name. I looked like me, but felt like a photograph of me, a copy that was almost perfect, but not quite right. People passed by without noticing me. I tried to stop someone, to ask for help, but they walked through my outstretched hand as if I wasn't there. Not seeing me, not hearing me, not acknowledging my existence in any way. I understood then what the figure had meant, what I had traded to escape the tunnel. I ran back to the entrance, but it was gone, sealed, filled in, replaced by a solid wall that looked like it had been there for decades. According to the plaque mounted on it, the entrance had been permanently closed in 1987. 38 years ago. But that can't be right. I entered it just hours ago. Days ago. The timeline doesn't work. Unless I'm not in my own time anymore. Unless the tunnel didn't just echo me. It replaced me. Sent me forward while keeping what I was before, storing it in its depths alongside all the other lost moments and missing people. I walk the streets now, watching people who can't see me, living in a city that is and isn't mine. Sometimes I hear footsteps behind me that match my rhythm exactly. Sometimes I catch glimpses of my reflection and see my face looking back with an expression I didn't make. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself standing outside the old Transit Authority building, staring at the sealed entrance where I emerged. I think about going back in, finding the tunnel, locating whatever part of me I left behind and reclaiming it. But I'm afraid of what I might find. Afraid that if I go back, I'll discover that I never left at all. That everything since that moment has been an echo, a reflection, bouncing through the tunnel's darkness. And I'm still walking through that passage, still searching for an exit I'll never reach. The footsteps are closer tonight, coming from behind me, from ahead of me, from inside me. The echoes are converging. Soon, I think, I'll understand what I really am. A person who escaped a tunnel, or an echo that thinks it did. The distinction, I'm learning, might not matter as much as I thought. Story 4. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before my birthday. Heavy cream, colored paper with embossed lettering that caught the light as I turned it in my hands. The calligraphy was exquisite, each letter perfectly formed, spelling out an invitation to a birthday party. My birthday party, at an address I didn't recognize. Hosted by someone whose name I couldn't quite make out. The signature a flowing script that seemed to change every time I looked at it. I showed it to my partner, Lisa. She frowned at it, turning it over. The back was blank. "Did you plan something?" I asked. "Not like this," she said. "I made reservations at that Italian place you like." Remember? I did remember. We had talked about keeping my 35th birthday low-key. Dinner, maybe drinks with a few friends. Nothing elaborate. Certainly nothing requiring engraved invitations to mysterious venues. "It's probably spam," I said. Like those fake legal notices designed to trick you into paying for something. But I kept the invitation. I'm not sure why. It sat on my desk for the next 3 weeks, catching my eye whenever I walked past. The address was in the old warehouse district, an area I rarely visited. The date was my birthday. The time was 8 in the evening. As my birthday approached, I forgot about the invitation. Lisa's plans materialized. She had arranged for 6 of our closest friends to meet us at the restaurant. I was looking forward to it. A normal celebration, predictable, safe. Then, on the morning of my birthday, Lisa got sick. Food poisoning, she thought, or maybe a stomach virus. She spent the day in bed, apologizing profusely, insisting I should go out with our friends anyway. But one by one, they all canceled. Work emergencies, family obligations, sudden illnesses. By 6 in the evening, I was sitting alone in our living room, staring at my phone, wondering if I should just order takeout and call it a night. That's when I saw the invitation again, still sitting on my desk. 8 in the evening. The address in the warehouse district. A party planned for me by someone whose name I couldn't quite read. I told Lisa I was going to check it out. She was half asleep, medicated and miserable, but she managed a weak smile. "Happy birthday," she murmured. "Be careful." I should have listened to that last part. The warehouse district at night was a maze of shadows and abandoned buildings. My GPS guided me through narrow streets lined with structures that looked like they hadn't been occupied in decades. But the address led me to a building that was clearly in use. Light poured from tall windows. I could hear music, muffled by brick and distance, but definitely music voices. Laughter. Someone was actually having a party here. The entrance was a heavy steel door with a brass number plate that matched the address on my invitation. I raised my hand to knock, but the door swung open before I could touch it. "Welcome." A man in an immaculate suit stood in the doorway, beaming at me. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. "We've been expecting you. Come in. Come in." "I'm not sure I'm in the right place," I started to say, but he had already taken my arm and was guiding me inside. The interior was stunning. What had looked like a derelict warehouse from outside had been transformed into an elegant party venue. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed beams. Long tables were covered with white tablecloths and laden with food. People in formal wear moved through the space, laughing and talking, holding champagne flutes that caught the light. "Your birthday party," the man said, gesturing broadly. "Everything has been prepared exactly as you requested." "I didn't request anything," I said. His smile never wavered. "Of course you did. Perhaps you've forgotten. Birthdays can be overwhelming. So many details, so many wishes. But we remember. We always remember. Come, let me introduce you to the other guests." He led me deeper into the party. The other guests turned to look as I passed, their faces friendly, their eyes bright. They all seemed to know me, nodding and smiling, raising their glasses in greeting. But I didn't recognize any of them. "I should call my wife," I said, reaching for my phone. "No signal in here, I'm afraid," the man said. "The old walls, very thick, blocks everything. But don't worry, you won't be long. Just long enough to enjoy your celebration." He guided me to a table where a woman in a red dress sat alone, staring at an untouched plate of food. As we approached, she looked up, and I saw her eyes were wrong. Not physically wrong, but empty in a way that made my stomach clench. "This is Margaret," the man said. "Margaret has been with us for quite some time. Haven't you, Margaret?" "Quite some time," she repeated, her voice flat. "Since my birthday." "Which one was that?" She looked at the man for confirmation. "Your 32nd, he said gently. "I'm 32, I said. "No," Margaret said. "I was 32. Now I don't know what I am." The man laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Margaret is being dramatic. She's still 32. She'll always be 32. That's the beauty of it. The perfect age, frozen forever." I backed away from the table. "I need to leave." "But you just arrived!" The man's smile was fixed now, permanent. "And we haven't sung yet." We haven't cut the cake. We haven't played the games. There's so much to do before you can go. Other guests were gathering around us now, forming a loose circle. Their faces were uniformly pleasant, but none of them blinked. I realized I hadn't seen anyone blink since I entered the building. "Please," I said. "I made a mistake. This isn't my party." "Of course it is." A woman in a blue dress stepped forward. She held a cake, 3 tiers covered in white frosting with my name written in elegant script. 30. 5 candles burned on top, their flames unnaturally still, not flickering despite the movement of air as people shifted around me. "We made it specially for you. All your favorites." I hadn't told anyone my favorite cake, but looking at it, I knew she was right. It was exactly what I would have chosen. The frosting, the flavor, even the decorations. Someone had reached into my mind and pulled out my preferences, translating them into this perfect, horrible confection. "I want to leave," I said more firmly. After the song, the man insisted. That wouldn't be a birthday without the song. They began to sing, all of them in perfect unison. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear." But they didn't sing my name. They sang something else, a word I didn't recognize. Syllables that hurt to hear, that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. I covered my ears, but the sound came from inside me now. The song continued, verse after verse, each one longer than it should be, each one adding new lyrics I had never heard. The guests swayed as they sang, their movements synchronized, their eyes locked on me. When they finally stopped, the silence was worse than the singing. "Make a wish," the woman with the cake said, holding it toward me. "I wish to leave," I said. She frowned. "That's not how it works. You have to wish for something real, something you truly want. That's the rule, the only rule," the man added. "Make your wish, blow out the candles, and then we can move on to the next part of the celebration." I looked at the candles. 35 flames, perfectly still. I thought about wishing for escape, for safety, for Lisa to be here with me. But some instinct warned me that any wish I made would be twisted, interpreted in ways I couldn't predict, used to trap me further. "I don't want to wish for anything," I said. The guests began to murmur. The sound grew louder, agitated. The man's smile finally slipped. "Everyone wants something," he said. "That's why birthdays exist. To mark the passage of time. To acknowledge growth and change, to express desires. You must wish for something." "No." The lights flickered. The chandelier crystals chimed as they swayed. The woman holding the cake stumbled, and frosting smeared across her dress. The other guests backed away, creating more space around me. "You're being difficult," the man said. His voice had changed, become deeper, resonant with something that wasn't quite anger. "We prepared everything for you. We made everything perfect. All you have to do is participate. It's your birthday. You should be grateful. I didn't ask for this." "You did." He pulled something from his pocket, my invitation. But when he unfolded it, I saw there was writing on the back now. My handwriting. A list of wishes, desires, secret hopes I had never spoken aloud. You asked for everything here. The party, the guests, the celebration that never ends. You wished for it, and we provided it. I never wrote that. You did. In your heart, in your dreams, in the quiet moments when you thought no one was listening. We heard. We always hear. And we always provide. He snapped his fingers, and the music started again. Not the birthday song. Something else. Something old and strange, a melody that made my bones ache. The guests began to dance, moving in patterns that were almost right, but subtly wrong. Their feet tracing shapes on the floor that hurt my eyes when I tried to follow them. Join us, the man said, extending his hand. Dance with us. Celebrate with us. Stay with us. You'll be 35 forever. Never aging. Never changing. Never having to face another birthday, because this one will never end. I ran. Through the dancing crowd, past tables heavy with food that smelled too sweet, under chandeliers that now swung wildly despite no breeze. The guests reached for me as I passed, their fingers brushing my clothes, my skin, leaving cold trails that lingered. I found a door and burst through it, expecting to emerge outside, into the cold night air and the safety of the city. Instead, I found another room. Same chandeliers, same tables, same guests, but wearing different clothes now, celebrating a different birthday. A man stood alone by a window, younger than me, maybe 25. He turned as I entered, and his face lit up with desperate hope. "Are you new?" he asked. "Did you just arrive?" "I'm trying to leave." "Good. That's good. Don't stay. Don't make a wish. Don't eat the food. Don't drink the champagne. Just find a way out before." He stopped, his eyes widening. I turned and saw the man in the immaculate suit standing behind me, still smiling. "Thomas," he said warmly, still trying to leave. "But it's your birthday. It's always your birthday. Why would you want to be anywhere else?" "Please?" Thomas whispered. "I've been here so long. I can't remember what day it really is. I can't remember my family's faces. I can't remember anything except the party." "That's because the party is all that matters," the man said. "Birthdays are the only days that count. Everything else is just waiting. We've eliminated the waiting. You should be grateful." I backed toward another door. The man watched me, but didn't move to stop me. "You'll understand eventually," he said. "They all do. The party has a way of making everything clear. Time loses meaning. Identity becomes fluid. And eventually, you realize that celebrating is all you were ever meant to do." I went through the door. Another room. Another party. A woman blowing out candles on a cake, her breath stirring the flames, but not extinguishing them. She blew and blew until she collapsed, gasping, and still the candles burned. Another room. Children playing party games. Pin the tail on the donkey, musical chairs, but their movements were mechanical, joyless. They played in silence, going through motions they had repeated thousands of times. Another room. A man opening presents. A tearing through wrapping paper, to reveal boxes within boxes within boxes, each one smaller than the last, searching desperately for whatever was supposed to be at the center, but never finding it. I ran through room after room, party after party, birthday after birthday. Each one was different but the same. Each guest was trapped in their celebration, frozen at the age they had been when they arrived, endlessly repeating the rituals of birthdays that never ended. And everywhere, I heard singing. That terrible song with the wrong syllables, echoing through the walls, vibrating in the floor, following me no matter how far I ran. I don't know how long I searched for an exit. Time felt wrong here, elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. Minutes might have been hours. Hours might have been minutes. I passed my own party several times, saw the guests still dancing, still celebrating, still waiting for me to return and make my wish. Finally, I found a staircase, narrow, poorly lit, leading down into darkness. It felt wrong, like going deeper would only trap me further. But every door I had tried led to more parties, more celebrations, more birthdays that wouldn't end. Maybe down was the only way out. The stairs seemed endless. I descended for what felt like hours, my legs burning, my breath coming in gasps. The sounds of the parties faded above me, replaced by silence so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. At the bottom, I found a door. Simple wood, no markings. I pushed it open and stepped through. I was outside. Cold night air hit my face. I was standing in the alley behind the warehouse, alone, shaking. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Lisa and texts asking if I was okay. The time was 8:37. I had been inside for just over 30 minutes. I called Lisa back, told her I was fine, told her the party had been a bust, and I was coming home. She sounded relieved, still sick, but worried about me. I promised I'd pick up soup on the way home. As I walked to my car, I noticed something in my pocket. I pulled it out. A single candle, white, unlit, and a book of matches with an address printed on the inside cover. Different address, different warehouse, and a date. 1 year from now, my 36th birthday. I threw them in a dumpster and drove home. I held Lisa as she slept, grateful for her warmth, her reality, their solid presence in a world that suddenly felt less stable than I had believed. But sometimes, late at night, I hear singing. Faint, distant, coming from somewhere I can't locate. That song with the wrong syllables, the one that vibrates inside my skull. And I wonder if I really left the party, or if I'm still there, still wandering through endless rooms, still searching for an exit from a celebration that never ends. My 36th birthday is approaching. I've been getting mail, invitations, reminders, cards from senders whose names I can't quite read. Lisa thinks I should see a therapist about my anxiety. She's probably right, but I know what's really happening. The party isn't over. It's never over. It's just waiting for me to come back, waiting for me to make my wish, waiting for me to accept that birthdays are prisons disguised as celebrations. I won't go. I won't open the door when they knock. I won't accept their invitations or eat their cake or blow out their candles. But I'm afraid it won't matter. I'm afraid that on my 36th birthday, at 8 in the evening, I'll find myself standing outside another warehouse, invitation in hand, unable to remember how I got there or why I thought I could stay away. Because everyone wants something. Everyone makes wishes. And somewhere, in the spaces between what we desire and what we admit, there's a party waiting. A celebration that never ends. A birthday that traps you at the perfect age. Frozen forever in a moment that was supposed to bring joy. The man in the immaculate suit knows where you live. He knows when your birthday is. He knows what you wish for in the quiet moments when you think no one is listening. And when you receive your invitation, you'll tell yourself you won't go. You'll tell yourself it's a mistake, a scam, something to ignore. But you'll keep the invitation. You'll think about it, and when your birthday comes, when your plans fall through, when you're alone and wondering why celebrations never feel the way they're supposed to, you'll remember that address. You'll tell yourself you're just curious, that you'll only stay a few minutes, that you can leave whenever you want, and maybe you can. Maybe you'll be stronger than I was, you smarter than Margaret or Thomas, or all the others trapped in their endless celebrations. Or maybe you'll make a wish. And maybe, just maybe, it will come true. That's what scares me most. Not that the party is a trap, but that it's a gift. That somewhere, in some dark corner of my heart, I wanted exactly what they were offering. An escape from time. An end to aging. A celebration that never has to end. If you see an invitation with your name on it, addressed in spidery script to a party you don't remember planning, do me a favor. Burn it. Don't read it. Don't keep it. Don't let curiosity win. Because the party is waiting. It's always waiting. And once you step inside, once you see the cake with your name on it, and hear the song sung just for you, leaving becomes harder than you can imagine. I should go. Lisa is calling. She's feeling better and wants to plan something special for next month. My birthday, number 36. I'll tell her no. I'll tell her I want to skip it this year. But I know she'll insist. She'll make plans. She'll invite friends. She'll try to give me a normal celebration. Unaware that normal celebrations stopped being possible the moment I walked through that warehouse door. The candle is back in my pocket. I threw it away, but it's back. And the matches. And tomorrow, I'm sure, there will be another invitation. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to all of us, singing songs we don't understand, making wishes we can't take back, celebrating ages we'll never leave behind. The party never ends. That's what they told me. That's what I'm learning to believe. See you at the next one. Your invitation is already on its way. Story 5. I discovered the library on a Tuesday afternoon in October, during one of my long walks through the older parts of the city. I had lived here for 5 years and thought I knew every street, every building, every corner worth knowing. But there it was, tucked tucked between a Vietnamese restaurant and an abandoned pharmacy, a narrow doorway with brass letters spelling out Atherton Public Library Est, 1887. I had never heard of it. There was no listing for it online, no reviews, no mention in any of the city guides I had consulted when I first moved here. Just this door, this brass plaque. This suggestion of a place that had somehow existed beneath my notice for half a decade. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into cool, paper-scented air. Inside was larger than outside should have permitted. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, supported by columns carved with patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them directly. Shelves extended in every direction, creating aisles that disappeared into shadow. The lighting came from somewhere I couldn't identify, sourceless and even, giving everything a slight amber tint that made it feel like perpetual late afternoon. There was no front desk, no librarian, no other patrons that I could see. Just books, thousands upon thousands of them, their spines creating walls of text and texture that surrounded me completely. I wandered deeper into the stacks, running my fingers along the shelves. The organization made no sense. Fiction mixed with history, mixed with philosophy, mixed with technical manuals. Authors I recognized sat next to names I had never encountered. The books themselves varied wildly in age and condition. Ancient leather, bound volumes rested beside paperbacks that looked freshly printed. I pulled one at random. The Afternoon Garden, by someone named Melissa Hartwell. I had never heard of it, but something about the cover drew me. A watercolor illustration of a garden at dusk, shadows lengthening across flower beds, a figure barely visible in the background. I opened to the first page and began to read. The prose was beautiful, precise and lyrical, describing a woman named Claire who had inherited a house with a garden that only bloomed in the afternoon. She spent her days tending it, watching the flowers open as the sun passed overhead, watching them close again as evening approached. It was meditative, calming, exactly the kind of story I needed after a stressful week. I lost track of time. The library was perfectly silent, except for the whisper of pages as I turned them. The book was exactly 287 pages long. I know because I checked when I was about halfway through, eager to know how much story remained, reluctant for it to end. When I finally looked up, intending to find a chair and get more comfortable, I realized I didn't know where I was. The easel looked different. The shelves were wrong. I had been standing near the front of the library when I started reading. I was certain of that. Now I was surrounded by stacks that stretched in every direction, no exit visible, no indication of which way led out. I walked back the way I had come, or tried to. But every turn revealed more shelves, more books, these more narrow corridors lined with literature. The library had grown while I was reading. It expanded into dimensions it hadn't possessed before. Or perhaps I had moved without noticing. Wandering through the stacks, while my attention was absorbed by Claire and her afternoon garden. I wasn't particularly worried. Libraries have exits. Retrace your steps, look for signs, ask for help. Standard procedures. Except there were no signs. No exit markers. No fire escape diagrams. And when I called out, asking if anyone could point me toward the door, my voice was absorbed by the books, muffled and flattened until it barely sounded like my own. I kept walking. The aisles all looked similar, making it impossible to tell if I was making progress or moving in circles. I tried marking my path by turning certain books backward on the shelves, creating breadcrumbs I could follow back. But when I returned to check, the books were facing forward again, filed properly, as if they had never been touched. My phone showed the time as 3:47 p.m. That was impossible. I had entered the library just after 2:00, read for maybe 45 minutes, and spent 10 minutes looking for an exit. It should have been around 300, not nearly 400. But the timestamp was clear, and when I checked again a few minutes later, it had advanced normally. I had lost time somewhere. In the reading, perhaps, or in the walking, or in the space between entering the library and realizing I was lost. I decided to be systematic, pick a direction and stick with it. Eventually, I would reach a wall, an exit, something that marked the boundary of the building. Libraries couldn't be infinite. They had to end somewhere. I walked for an hour. The shelves never stopped. The books never repeated. Each spine was unique, each title different from the last. I passed sections on subjects I didn't know existed, languages I didn't recognize, topics so specific they couldn't possibly justify an entire shelf of volumes. Then I saw another person. She was standing at the end of an aisle, reading a book, completely absorbed. She was around my age, dressed in casual clothes that looked slightly out of date. Her hair was tied back, and she wore glasses that caught the sourceless amber light. "Excuse me," I said, relief flooding through me. "Can you tell me how to get out?" As she looked up slowly, as if surfacing from deep water, her eyes took a moment to focus on me. "Out," she repeated. The word sounded foreign in her mouth, like she was testing its pronunciation. "Yes, the exit, the door. I can't seem to find my way back to the entrance." She frowned. "I don't think there is one." "There has to be. I came in through the front door about 2 hours ago." "2 hours," she said softly. "Is that all?" She looked down at her book, then back at me. "I came in on a Thursday to return some books. I was only going to stay for a few minutes. That was 3 months ago." I stared at her. "That's not possible." I thought so too. But the library doesn't care what's possible. It only cares about stories. And once you start reading, once you really get absorbed in a story, the library keeps you here until you finish. I did finish. The book I was reading. I finished it. "Did you?" She gestured to my hand. I was still holding The Afternoon Garden. I had thought I had finished it, remembered reading the final page, the resolution of Claire's story. But when I checked, I was only on page 143. Halfway through. The ending I remembered hadn't happened yet. "That's impossible," I said again. the word losing meaning as I repeated it. The library changes things, the woman said. Time, space, memory. The stories get inside you, and you get inside the stories, and eventually you can't tell the difference. I've been trying to finish my book for 3 months. Every time I get close to the end, new chapters appear. The story keeps extending, finding new directions, refusing to conclude. She showed me her book, The Winter of Seven Sorrows, by Harrison Blake. The page count kept changing as I watched. 412 pages, 415, 419, growing with each glance. How do you eat? I asked. How do you sleep? How do you survive? I don't get hungry here. Don't get tired. Time passes, but my body doesn't experience it the same way. It's like being suspended. Frozen at the moment I started reading. I know intellectually that 3 months have passed. My phone shows the date advancing, but I don't feel it. I just feel the story pulling me forward, page after page after page. There has to be a way out, I insisted. She smiled sadly. Maybe there is. Maybe if you finish your story completely, really reach the end, the library lets you go. But I can't test it. My story won't end. And I don't know if I want it to anymore. The outside world feels distant now, unreal. The library and the books are what's solid. Everything else is just memory. She went back to reading, dismissing me without another word. I watched her for a moment, seeing how completely she was absorbed. How her eyes tracked the words with desperate intensity, searching for an ending that kept receding. I looked at my own book, 287 pages. I was on the 143, halfway through. If I finished it, would the library release me, or would new pages appear, extending Claire's story indefinitely, trapping me the way the woman was trapped? I started reading again, unable to stop myself. The story was too good. Claire had discovered something in her garden, something that bloomed only in the deepest afternoon shadows, something that changed her perception of time and space. The prose pulled me forward, sentence by sentence, page by page. When I looked up again, I was somewhere else in the library. Different shelves, different books. I checked the page number, 156. I had read 13 pages without noticing I was walking. Or had the library moved around me while I was absorbed in the story? I saw other readers now, scattered throughout the stacks, alone or in small groups, all holding books, all reading with that same desperate intensity. Some looked normal, others looked wrong, as if they had been here so long they had started to become part of the library itself. Their skin had a papery quality. Their movements were stiff, careful, like pages being turned. I tried talking to them, but most didn't respond. They were too deep in their stories. Those who did acknowledge me offered the same warnings. Finish your book. Don't start another. Find the ending before the library finds new ways to extend it. But none of them could tell me how to leave. None of them had found an exit. They had all been here for different lengths of time. From days to years to durations they couldn't accurately measure. And they were all still reading, still searching for conclusions that never came. I kept moving, kept reading. The two activities had become inseparable. Walking through the library meant reading. Reading meant the library changed around me. I would read a passage about Claire walking through her garden, and suddenly I would be in a different section of the library, surrounded by books on botanical subjects. I would read about her discovering old letters in a desk drawer, and I would find myself near shelves of correspondence and diaries. The library was responding to the story, or the story was responding to the library. The boundary between them was dissolving. I checked my page count obsessively. 167, 178, 191. Each page took longer to read than the last, not because the prose was difficult, but because I was afraid. Afraid of reaching the end. Afraid of not reaching it. Afraid of what would happen either way. Other readers passed me like ghosts. We didn't speak. We barely acknowledged each other. We were all alone in our stories, isolated by the narratives that held us captive. I saw the woman again, still reading her book. She looked different now. Thinner, paler, more translucent. As if she was fading, becoming text herself, transforming from reader to read. "How many pages now?" I asked. She checked. 743. It won't stop growing. I'm reading faster, but it's adding pages faster than I can finish them. I'm losing. The story is winning. What happens if you stop reading? I tried. For a few minutes. The letters started crawling off the page, moving through the air, attaching themselves to my skin. The story was trying to read me instead. I started reading again, and they went back. But I know they're waiting. If I stop for too long, they'll come back. They'll finish what they started. Now she turned away, back to her book, her eyes tracking words that I couldn't see, reading sentences that existed only for her. I returned to my own story. Page 2 and 3. Claire had found the source of the strange flowers. They weren't growing from the earth. They were growing from time itself, blooming in the gaps between moments, fed by the hours that fell through cracks in normal chronology. She was learning to tend them, to cultivate time, to garden in the spaces between seconds. The prose was beautiful, hypnotic. I didn't want it to end, even knowing I was trapped. Even understanding the danger, I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to know what happened to Claire. I wanted to follow her deeper into her garden, deeper into the mysteries she was discovering. That's what the library counted on. Not force.
Not imprisonment.
Just stories so compelling you couldn't stop reading. Narratives that hooked into your attention and wouldn't let go. By the time you realized you were trapped, you were too invested in the story to want escape more than resolution. Page 225. Claire was changing. The garden was changing her. She was becoming something that belonged to the afternoon. A being that existed only in that liminal time between day and evening. She was happy about it. The transformation felt like coming home. I realized I was identifying too closely. Claire's transformation was mine. Her garden was this library. Her afternoon was this eternal amber light. I was reading about my own fate disguised as fiction. Page 250. getting closer to the end. Only 37 pages left. I could finish. I could reach the conclusion. And then what? Would the library release me? Or would I discover that finishing was just another trap, a transition from one prison to another? I forced myself to stop reading, put the book down on a shelf, walked away. The library resisted. Every step felt like moving through water. The air grew thick. The amber light dimmed. I could hear whispers, not from other readers, but from the books themselves, calling me back, reminding me I hadn't finished, promising satisfaction if I would just return and read the final pages. I kept walking, away from my book, away from Claire and her garden, searching for an exit with renewed determination, focusing my will on escape rather than resolution. The shelves began to shake. Books fell, landing open, pages fluttering like trapped birds. I stepped over them, around them, refusing to look at the text, refusing to let my eyes catch on any words that might hook my attention. Then I saw it. A door. Simple, wooden, with a brass handle. It stood at the end of an aisle, looking entirely out of place, too normal for this impossible library. An exit. A way out. Finally, I ran toward it. My heart pounding, my breath coming in gasps, even though I shouldn't have been tired, shouldn't have needed to breathe more than normally. The door stayed where it was, not receding, not disappearing. Real, solid, offering escape. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened onto another section of the library. More shelves. More books. More amber light stretching into infinite distance. Not an exit. Just another room in an endless building. Another chapter in a story that refused to end. I slumped against the door frame, despair washing over me. There was no escape. The library went on forever. I would read forever. I would become like the woman, like all the others, fading into text, transforming from person to paper until I was just another story on one of these endless shelves. Unless I finished my book, I went back, found the afternoon garden where I had left it, picked it up, opened to page 250. The story had changed. New text had appeared, adding pages, extending the narrative. Now it was 340 pages long. I had stopped reading, and the library had punished me by making my story longer, by pushing the ending further away. But I had no choice. Reading was the only option. Finishing was the only hope. I read page 251, 253. Claire was fully transformed now. Part of the garden, part of the afternoon, part of time itself. She tended her flowers with hands that were becoming leaves. She spoke to the sunlight in a language of chlorophyll and photosynthesis. She was losing her humanity, and she was happy. Page 275, 280, 290. The narrative was accelerating, pulling me forward. Eager to reach its conclusion, now that I had committed fully to finishing. The library could sense my surrender, my acceptance. It was rewarding me by letting the story progress. Page 310, 320, 330. Claire was barely recognizable, more plant than person, more moment than being. She had become what she had always wanted to be, eternal afternoon, frozen in perfect growth, never withering, never ending. Page 340. The last page. I read the final paragraph slowly, savoring it, dreading it. Claire dissolved completely into her garden, her consciousness spreading across the flower beds, becoming aware of every petal, every root, every second of afternoon that bloomed and faded and bloomed again. The story ended with her at perfect peace, perfectly still, perfectly trapped in the time and place she had chosen. I closed the book. The library shuddered. The amber light brightened. I felt something release, some tension I hadn't known I was carrying. The story was complete. I had finished it. Now what? The shelves began to move, sliding sideways, rearranging themselves, creating a clear path where there had been only maze before. I followed it, walking between walls of books that shifted to accommodate me, opening a corridor that led toward something I couldn't quite see. The door appeared ahead, the same wooden door with the brass handle. But this time I knew it was real. This time the library was letting me leave. Because I had finished my story. Because I had earned my exit by reading until the end. I reached for the handle. "Wet," someone called. I turned. The woman from before stood behind me, her book clutched to her chest. "You finished?" she asked. "Yes, and it's letting you go." "I think so." She held out her book. "Take mine. Finish it, please. I can't do it alone. It won't let me. But maybe if you read it, if you see the ending that I can't reach, maybe I can leave too." I looked at her book. The Winter of Seven Sorrows. It was impossibly thick now, swollen with pages that had been added over months of desperate reading. Taking it would mean staying longer, reading more, risking that the library would find a way to trap me again. But she was fading. I could see through her now, see the shelves behind her, through her increasingly translucent form. Soon she would be gone completely, absorbed into the library, transformed from reader to text. I took the book, her face flooded with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you. Just finish it. That's all. Just find the ending and read it out loud. Let me hear how the story ends." I opened to the first page. The prose was dense, complicated, nothing like the lyrical beauty of Claire's garden. This was harsh, painful, a narrative of loss and grief and winters that wouldn't end. 7 sorrows, each one detailed across dozens of pages, each one bleeding into the next without resolution. I started reading aloud. The woman listened, her eyes closed, tears streaming down her translucent face. The library listened too. I could feel its attention, its hunger for story, its need to consume narrative. I was feeding it by reading, giving it more of what it wanted, extending my time here by taking on someone else's burden. But I couldn't stop. The woman was depending on me, and the story, despite its difficulty, was compelling. Each sorrow was unique, painful, beautifully rendered. I found myself caring about the characters, wanting to know how their grief would resolve, if it would resolve. Page 100, 200, 300. The book was shrinking as I read, returning to its original length, shedding the pages that had been added over the woman's months of captivity. She was becoming more solid as the book diminished, regaining substance as her story approached its end. Page 500, 600, 700, getting closer. The seventh sorrow was unfolding, the final tragedy revealing itself, and beneath it, a possibility of redemption. Not happiness exactly, but acceptance, understanding, the kind of peace that comes from surviving grief rather than escaping it. Page 750, the last page. I read the final sentence aloud. And when spring came at last, she found she could remember winter without flinching, could hold all 7 sorrows in her heart, like stones worn smooth by time, and still move forward. The book closed itself in my hands. The woman gasped, her eyes flying open. She was solid again, completely present.
Real. I heard it.
She whispered. I heard the ending. After all this time, I finally know how it ends. The library shuddered again. Another path opened, leading to another door. The woman walked toward it without hesitation, then paused and looked back at me. Thank you. I don't know your name. I don't know if I'll remember this once I leave. But thank you. She opened the door and stepped through. For a moment, I saw daylight beyond it, real sunlight, not the amber glow of the library. Then the door closed, and she was gone. I stood alone in the library, holding her book. It was thin now, normal-sized, its original length restored. I set it on a shelf and turned back to my own door, the one that had appeared when I finished Claire's story. It was still there, still waiting. The library was keeping its promise. I had finished my story. I could leave. I reached for the handle, then stopped. Around me, dozens of readers remained, trapped in their stories, searching for endings they couldn't reach, fading slowly into text and memory. I had saved one. Could I save others? I picked up another book from a nearby shelf. The Cartographer's Daughter, by someone named Elena Frost. I opened it and started reading. The prose pulled me in immediately. A story about a girl who inherited her father's maps of places that didn't exist, maps that created reality rather than describing it. I read for what might have been hours or days. Time had no meaning here. I finished the book and felt the library acknowledge the completion. Another path opened. Another door appeared. But I didn't take it. I picked up another book instead. The Last Conductor, by Marcus Webb. A story about a train that ran on memories instead of tracks, transporting passengers through their own pasts, searching for moments they had lost. I finished it. The library offered another exit. I ignored it and picked up another book. This became my pattern, my purpose. I read story after story, finishing books that others couldn't finish, creating exits that others could use. Sometimes I saw readers leave, stepping through doors that appeared because I had reached an ending they couldn't reach. Sometimes they thanked me. Usually they just left, grateful and confused, not understanding why the library had suddenly released them. I don't know how long I've been here. My phone stopped working after the first few days, or weeks. The date it shows is meaningless, jumping randomly between numbers that don't correspond to any calendar I understand. My body doesn't age, doesn't hunger. doesn't tire. I exist in the same suspended state as the other readers, frozen at the moment I chose to stay. Because I did choose this. That's the part I'm still coming to terms with. I could have left after finishing Claire's story. I could have walked through that first door and returned to my life. But I stayed. I picked up another book, and another, and another. The library didn't trap me. I trapped myself. But is it really a trap if you're doing what you love? I've always been a reader. Always preferred stories to reality. Always found comfort in pages rather than people. The library understands this about me. It understood it from the moment I walked through its door, when I picked up that first book, and got so absorbed I lost track of where I was. I'm not fading like the others. I'm not becoming translucent or papery. If anything, I'm becoming more solid, more defined. The library isn't consuming me. It's feeding me. Every story I finish makes me stronger, clearer, more present. I've become part of the library's ecology, a reader who helps other readers, a finisher of stories, a creator of exits. The library needs people like me. It needs someone to complete the narratives, to reach the endings, to close the books, so they can be opened again by someone new. In return, it gives me what I've always wanted. Infinite stories, endless books, a lifetime of reading compressed into a space outside time. I can spend years with a single book, savoring every sentence, or race through dozens in what feels like hours. I can revisit old favorites or discover new ones. The library's collection is inexhaustible. Sometimes I wonder about the life I left behind, my apartment, my job, the people who knew me. Do they think I'm dead? Do they remember me at all? Does time pass the same way outside as it does in here? Or have I been gone for centuries, my world transformed beyond recognition? I don't think about it often. The stories are more interesting than speculation. And if I'm honest, I was never that attached to my outside life. It was fine, adequate, but it never felt as real as the worlds I found in books. Those felt like home in a way my actual home never did. The library is my home now. These amber-lit aisles, these endless shelves, these stories that need finishing and readers who need help. This is where I belong. I see new readers sometimes. They arrive confused. Drawn by doors they didn't know they were looking for, holding invitations they can't quite remember receiving. They pick up books. They start reading. They get lost. Some realize quickly they're trapped and panic. Some take days to understand. A few never understand at all, just wander the stacks in a daze, not quite reading, not quite aware. I try to help them. I offer advice. Finish your book. Don't start another unless you mean to stay. Find an ending and take the exit it creates. Most don't listen. They're too absorbed in their stories, too convinced they can find their own way out. So too proud to accept help from someone who obviously hasn't managed to leave either. They don't understand that I'm not trying to leave. That I've found what I was looking for. That the library isn't my prison but my paradise. There's a woman I see regularly now. She arrived a few days ago, or maybe weeks. She's reading The Astronomer's Garden, a story about someone who grows stars like flowers, cultivating constellations in carefully tended beds. It's a beautiful book. I read it myself early on. She's almost finished. I can tell by how carefully she's turning the pages, by how she keeps checking to see how many remain. She's afraid of reaching the end, afraid of what comes next. I could tell her it's okay. That finishing is a gift, not a loss. That the exit will appear, and she can choose whether to take it. But she needs to discover that herself. That's part of the story. I've finished 17 books today. Or maybe it was 70. The numbers blur together after a while. Each completion creates another exit, another choice for another reader. Most take them. Some hesitate. A very few, like me, choose to stay. The library is growing. I can feel it expanding, adding rooms and sections, incorporating new books and new genres. It's alive in a way buildings shouldn't be. Conscious, aware, hungry for stories and the readers who bring them to life. I'm helping it grow. Every book I finish feeds it. Every ending I reach strengthens it. I'm not just a reader anymore. I'm a gardener, tending stories, cultivating narratives, helping the library bloom. Claire would understand. She learned to tend her afternoon garden, to cultivate time, to become part of what she was nurturing. I'm doing the same thing, becoming part of the library, merging with the collection, transforming from reader to read. But unlike Claire, I'm not losing myself. I'm finding myself, the real me, the person I was always meant to be. Someone who exists in stories, someone who lives between pages, someone who belongs to literature more than to life. The door is still there. My door. The first exit the library offered me. It hasn't disappeared. It stands at the end of an aisle I know well, waiting patiently, offering escape whenever I want it. The library isn't holding me hostage. It never was. I walk past it every day, every hour, every time I finish a book and create a new exit for someone else. I could leave any time. I could step through and return to the world outside. But why would I? Out there is a life I barely remember, a routine I never loved, a reality that always felt less real than fiction. Out here is everything I've ever wanted. Stories without end, books without limit. A place where reading isn't an escape from life, but the point of life. I'm not trapped in the library. I'm freed by it. The woman with the astronomer's garden has reached the last page. She's crying. The ending must be beautiful. Most endings are, if you have the courage to reach them. She closes the book, and a door appears beside her. She stares at it for a long time. Then she puts the book back on the shelf, picks up another. The City of Whispered Hours, starts reading. She's chosen to stay. The library hums with satisfaction. Another reader who understands. Another person who has found their home in the stacks. Another gardener to tend the endless garden of stories. I smile and return to my own book, The Memory Palace of Forgotten Dreams. It's 843 pages long, and I'm only on page 67. I have so much story ahead of me, so many words to absorb, So many worlds to explore. Outside this library, somewhere in a city I barely remember, people are going about their lives. Working, eating, sleeping, experiencing time in the linear way that biological beings must. They probably think they're free. They probably believe they're living authentic lives. But in here, in this amber, lit infinity, in this cathedral of literature, we know better. We've found true freedom, the freedom to read without end, to exist in narrative, to become story ourselves. The library doesn't trap people. It saves them from time, from death, from the mundane horror of lives without magic. It offers infinity in exchange for nothing more than attention. All you have to do is read. All you have to do is finish. All you have to do is choose whether to leave or stay. I chose. I stayed. And I've never been happier. The amber light glows eternal. The pages whisper their secrets. The stories unfold their infinite branches. And I read, and read, and read. There is no ending to this story. That's what makes it perfect. The library has no final page. The collection has no conclusion. I can read forever, and I will. And that's not a curse or a trap or a tragedy. It's exactly what I always wanted. If you find the door with the brass letters, if you step inside and pick up a book, if you start reading and lose track of time, if you look up and realize you're lost, surrounded by stories, unable to find your way back, don't be afraid. You're not trapped. You're home. And if you choose to stay, if you decide that reading forever is better than living for a limited time, if you become one of us who tend the garden of endless pages, then welcome. We've been waiting for you. The library is always waiting for the next reader, the next story, the next person who understands that some infinities are worth choosing. I turn the page. 68. Only 775 pages remaining. Only 775 pages until I can start another book, and another, forever. That's not a threat. It's a promise. The library keeps its promises. Always has. Always will. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a story to finish. And then another. And then another. After all, I have all the time in the world. More than that. I have all the time that ever was and ever will be, compressed into this amber moment that never ends. The library saw to that, and I'm grateful. Story 6. I've always been a light sleeper. The smallest sound pulls me from dreams, leaves me staring at the ceiling in the blue darkness of my bedroom, listening to the house settle around me. Creaks and groans, the whisper of wind against windows, the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. All familiar, all safe, until the knocking started. The first time, I thought I had imagined it. 3 sharp raps on my front door. So precise they seemed deliberate, calculated. I checked my phone. 3:30, 7 in the morning. No one knocks at that hour unless something is terribly wrong. I went downstairs, my heart hammering, and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. Just the yellow circle of my porch light, illuminating weathered wood, and the edge of the welcome mat. I opened the door anyway, stepped out into the cold November air, and looked around. Nothing. No car in the street. no figure retreating into shadows. Just the quiet suburban night, undisturbed. But there was a package on my doorstep. It sat directly in front of the door, a brown cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper with no markings except my address written in spidery handwriting. No return address, no shipping label, no indication of how it had arrived. I brought it inside. Part of me knew I shouldn't. Part of me understood that accepting deliveries at 3 in the morning violated some fundamental rule of common sense. But curiosity won. It always does. The box was lighter than it looked. I shook it gently, and something shifted inside. Something that didn't rattle or thud, but seemed to move with a liquid grace, flowing from one end to the other. I set it on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time, debating whether to open it. In the end, I left it sitting there and went back to bed. Whatever was inside could wait until morning, when the world made more sense, when mysterious deliveries seemed less threatening and more mundane. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that knocking again, echoing through my dreams. 3 precise raps, patient, insistent, waiting. Morning came with gray light filtering through my curtains. I went downstairs to find the package exactly where I had left it. In daylight, it looked even more innocuous. Just a box. Probably a mistaken delivery. I would open it, discover it was meant for a neighbor, and return it. I got a knife from the drawer and cut through the tape. Inside was tissue paper, white and crisp, folded carefully around something. I pulled it back and found a pair of gloves. Not winter gloves, not work gloves. These were formal, elegant, made of thin black leather so soft it felt like silk. The kind of gloves someone might wear to an opera or a fancy dinner party. Vintage, probably. Expensive. There was no note, no explanation. Just the gloves lying in their nest of tissue paper, waiting. I picked them up. They were sized perfectly for my hands, as if whoever had sent them had taken precise measurements. I turned them over, looking for a maker's mark or any indication of where they had come from. Nothing. Just flawless black leather and delicate stitching. I should have thrown them away. Instead, I put them in a drawer in my hallway, closed the drawer firmly, and tried to forget about them. The second package arrived 3 nights later, same time. 3:30, 7 exactly. 3 sharp knocks that pulled me from sleep and sent me downstairs in my pajamas, already knowing what I would find. Another box, same size, same plain brown paper, same spidery handwriting. This time I opened it immediately, standing there on my porch in the cold night air. Inside was a hat, black, wide-brimmed, the kind that had been fashionable in the 40s or 50s. It fit perfectly when I tried it on, sitting on my head as if it had been made specifically for me. I set it next to the gloves in the drawer and locked my front door with both the deadbolt and the chain, as if locks would matter to someone who could appear and disappear without being seen. Who could leave packages without making a sound beyond those 3 deliberate knocks? The third package brought shoes. Black leather Oxfords, polished to a mirror shine. They fit perfectly. The fourth brought a coat. Long black, with a high collar and deep pockets. It hung perfectly from my shoulders. The fifth brought a scarf. Silk. Black with subtle patterns woven into the fabric. Patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them too long, forming shapes that were almost recognizable before dissolving back into abstract swirls. Each package arrived at 3:30, 7 in the morning. Each contained one piece of an outfit. Each fit me perfectly. And with each delivery, I felt something changing. Not in the physical world, but in the space between waking and sleeping. In the moments when consciousness blurred and reality became negotiable. I started to dream about walking. Long walks through streets I didn't recognize, wearing the clothes that had been delivered to me. In these dreams, I carried packages. Brown boxes wrapped in plain paper, addressed in spidery handwriting. I delivered them to houses where lights burned in upstairs windows, where people lay sleeping, where something waited behind carefully locked doors. I tried not wearing the clothes. I tried throwing them away. But they always returned to the drawer, folded neatly, waiting patiently. And the knocking continued. 3:30, 7 every third night. 3 sharp raps. Another package. The 6th delivery brought gloves again. Different gloves. These were thicker, heavier. Work gloves. The kind someone might wear when they needed to handle something dangerous. Something that might bite or burn or poison. The 7th brought a bag. Black canvas with a sturdy handle and a clasp that locked. It was empty, but inside, the fabric was stained with things I didn't want to identify. Dark patches that might have been old blood, or ink, or something else entirely. The 8th brought instructions. They were written on old paper, yellowed and brittle, in that same spidery handwriting. The words were simple. You have been chosen. You have accepted the gifts. Now you must complete the deliveries tonight. Begin at moonrise. End at dawn. The addresses are in your head. The packages are in your hands. Do not open them. Do not ask questions. Do not fail. I read the note 3 times. It made no sense. I hadn't accepted anything. I had just been too confused, too curious, too passive to refuse. Wasn't that different from acceptance? But when I closed my eyes, I could see addresses. Locations scattered across the city, houses and apartments where something waited. And when I opened my hands, they remembered the weight of packages, the texture of brown paper, the feeling of carrying something important, something dangerous, something necessary. Moonrise came at 8:40, 3 that evening. I know because I watched for it, standing at my window, wearing the clothes that had been delivered to me. The coat, the hat, the gloves, the shoes, the scarf. They fit perfectly. They felt right in a way that disturbed me, more than any of the individual deliveries had. I looked like someone from another era, someone who had stepped out of an old photograph, out of a time when deliveries were made by hand, when people trusted strangers at their doors. when the night belonged to those who walked through it with purpose. The bag was on my table, still empty, still waiting. I picked it up, and it was full, heavy with packages. Brown boxes wrapped in plain paper, each one addressed in spidery handwriting. I hadn't filled it. I hadn't put anything inside. But now it bulged with deliveries, and I knew every address. Knew the precise route I needed to take. Knew the exact order in which the packages had to be delivered. I left my house at moonrise and began to walk. The first address was 3 blocks away. A small house with peeling paint and an overgrown garden. The lights were off. I walked up the steps, pulled a package from my bag, and knocked 3 times on the door. Sharp, precise, patient. No one answered, but I knew I should leave the package. I set it on the doorstep and walked away. Behind me, I heard the door open. I didn't look back. The second address was farther. An apartment building downtown. I climbed 4 flights of stairs and knocked on Unit 412. 3 sharp raps. The sounds echoed in the hallway, hollow and final. I left the package and descended before anyone could answer. With each delivery, the bag remained full. I would pull out a package, deliver it, reach into the bag, and find another waiting. The supply was endless. The addresses continued, and I walked through the sleeping city, a figure from another time, carrying mysteries I didn't understand to people I had never met. Some of the houses were dark. Some had lights burning in upstairs windows. Some had doors that opened as soon as I knocked, revealing darkness beyond. No figure visible, but presence unmistakable. I left packages in all of them. I didn't ask questions. I didn't look too closely, but I began to notice things. The packages weren't all the same. Some were heavy. Some were light. Some made sounds when I walked. Soft scratching or liquid whispers or rhythmic thumping that matched my heartbeat. Some were warm to the touch. Some were cold enough to burn through the gloves. And the addresses weren't random. I recognized some of them. Houses I had passed before, buildings I had noticed in my daily life. The woman who walked her dog past my house every morning lived at one address. My dentist lived at another. A coworker lived at a third. I was delivering to people I knew, to people in my life, and I had no idea what I was leaving on their doorsteps. The night stretched on. I walked miles through empty streets, my footsteps echoing, my breath clouding in the cold air. The moon tracked across the sky. The bag never emptied. The deliveries never stopped. I began to see others. Figures dressed like me, wearing clothes from different eras, carrying bags and boxes and parcels. We didn't speak. We didn't acknowledge each other. We just walked our separate routes, delivering our mysterious packages, serving purposes we didn't understand. An army of midnight deliverymen, moving through the sleeping world, leaving gifts or curses or something in between. How many of us were there? How long had this been happening? And what were we really delivering? At 3:30, 7 in the morning, I found myself at the final address, my own house. I stood on my own porch, looking at my own door, holding a package addressed to me in spidery handwriting. The last delivery. The one that would complete the route and end the night's work. I knew I shouldn't open it. The instructions had been clear. But I also knew I couldn't leave it sitting on my own doorstep. Couldn't knock on my own door and walk away. Couldn't maintain the pretense that I was delivering to someone else. I set down the bag and carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a uniform. Not the vintage clothes I was wearing, but a modern deliveryman's uniform. The kind worn by package delivery drivers, complete with a name tag and a company logo I recognized. A major shipping company, one that delivered to my house regularly. With the uniform was a note written in different handwriting. Modern. Typed. An official memo. New employee orientation begins Monday. Report to warehouse district at 6 a.m. for training. Welcome to the team. I didn't remember applying for a job. Didn't remember interviewing. Didn't remember accepting an offer. But here was the uniform, and here was the start date, and here was a position I apparently now held. I looked up at my house. Through the window, I could see myself sleeping in my bed. Not a reflection. Not a dream. Actually me, actually sleeping. Unaware that another version of me stood on the porch holding a uniform and an impossible situation. The bag at my feet was empty now. The night's deliveries were complete. Dawn was approaching, painting the eastern sky with pale gray light. Soon the sleeping world would wake. Soon people would find packages on their doorsteps. Soon they would open them and discover whatever had been delivered. And some of them, I knew, would find exactly what I had found. An invitation, an obligation, a transformation into someone who walked the night delivering mysteries to sleeping houses. I put on the uniform. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Everything that had been delivered to me fit perfectly. That was the point. That was how it worked. You were measured in ways you didn't understand, fitted for a role you didn't choose, and eventually you accepted it, because refusing was never really an option. The vintage clothes folded themselves neatly into the bag closed itself, and I was left standing on my porch in a deliveryman's uniform as dawn broke and the neighborhood began to stir. I went inside. The sleeping version of me was gone. Or perhaps I was the sleeping version, and the one I had seen was the waking one. Or perhaps there was no difference anymore. Perhaps the line between delivering and receiving, between walking the night and sleeping through it, had dissolved somewhere along those miles of empty streets. My phone rang. I answered it without thinking. "This is dispatch," a voice said. "You're scheduled for your first route today. Report to the warehouse in 2 hours. You'll be driving truck 17. We have a lot of packages that need delivering." "What kind of packages?" I asked. The voice laughed. "All kinds. You'll see. Every house gets exactly what it needs, or what it deserves. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they're not. You'll learn to tell the difference." The call ended. I looked at my uniform, at the official name tag, at the logo of a company I had trusted for years to deliver packages to my door. How many of those packages had been normal? How many had been like the ones I had received? How many drivers had walked the route I walked last night? Of delivering mysteries in vintage clothes before donning modern uniforms and blending back into the daylight world. I have 2 hours before my first shift. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, writing this, trying to make sense of what happened. Trying to decide if I should report to the warehouse or run as far as I can. But I know I'll report. I know I'll climb into truck 17 and deliver whatever packages are loaded into it. I know because the uniform fits perfectly, because the route is already in my head, because some part of me has always been walking through darkness, carrying mysteries to sleeping houses. We all get deliveries. Some arrive in daylight, brought by smiling drivers in familiar uniforms. Some arrive at 3:30, 7 in the morning, left by figures who disappear before you can see their faces. And some arrive from inside ourselves, emerging from places we didn't know existed, fitting perfectly into lives we thought we understood. I'm a deliveryman now. Maybe I always was. Maybe we all are, carrying something we don't fully understand, leaving it on doorsteps and moving on, before we have to see what happens when someone opens the package. Tonight, at 3:37, someone will knock on a door 3 times sharp, precise, patient. They'll leave a package and disappear into darkness, and someone will bring it inside. Will open it despite all logic suggesting they shouldn't. Will accept what they find, even as they tell themselves they're refusing. That's how it works. That's how it spreads. That's how an army of midnight delivermen grows, one mysterious package at a time. I should go. Truck 17 is waiting. The packages are loaded. The addresses are in my head. Some of them might be yours. When you hear that knocking, when you find that box on your doorstep, when you open it despite every instinct telling you not to. Remember this, you have been chosen. You have accepted the gifts. Now you must complete the deliveries. We all must. Eventually. One way or another. The line between receiving and delivering is thinner than you think. Story 7. The cat arrived on a Tuesday in late October, appearing in my backyard, as if it had always been there, and I'd simply failed to notice. It was completely black, from its whiskers to the tip of its tail, with eyes that caught the light in shades of gold and green. It sat perfectly still beneath my oak tree, watching the house with an intensity that seemed almost human. I should have left it alone. I should have let it finish whatever business had brought it to my property and move on. But I've never been good at leaving things alone, especially things that don't belong to me. I opened the back door and called to it, making the clicking sounds people make to attract cats. It didn't move. It just watched me with those unsettling eyes, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws, its posture suggesting both patience and judgment. "Are you lost?" I asked, stepping out onto the porch. "Are you hungry?" Still no response. The cat maintained its vigil beneath the tree. a small statue carved from shadow. I went back inside and returned with a bowl of tuna from a can I'd been planning to use for lunch. I set it down on the porch steps and retreated, giving the cat space. It regarded the offering for a long moment, then stood and walked toward it with movements that seemed too deliberate, too considered for an ordinary animal. It ate delicately, pausing between bites to look up at me. I had the distinct impression it was accepting my offer not out of hunger, but out of politeness, or perhaps as acknowledgement of some transaction I didn't fully understand. When the bowl was empty, the cat sat back on its haunches and cleaned its face with one paw, grooming itself with meticulous care. Then it stood, walked down the porch steps, and disappeared into the bushes at the edge of my property. I thought that would be the end of it. A brief encounter with a stray, a small moment of connection with the natural world. Nothing more. I went back inside and forgot about it, returning to the work I'd been avoiding, the emails I'd been putting off, the general maintenance of a life I'd stopped finding particularly meaningful years ago. The cat returned the next day, and the day after that. Always at dusk, always sitting in the same spot beneath the oak tree, always watching the house with that unsettling focus. I started putting food out for it regularly, and it started accepting these offerings with the same careful politeness, as if we were engaging in some formal ritual whose rules I didn't quite understand. After a week, it began coming closer, first to the porch, then to the back door, then finally into the house itself, slipping through the door when I opened it to put out its food. It explored my home methodically, investigating each room with systematic thoroughness, sniffing corners and examining furniture, and occasionally stopping to stare at things I couldn't see. I should have felt invaded, uncomfortable with this uninvited presence in my private space. Instead, I felt something close to relief. The house had been too quiet since my wife left 6 months ago to empty, and still, the cat's presence filled some of that emptiness, even if it wasn't particularly affectionate or playful. It simply existed in my space, a silent observer, a witness to my diminished life. I named it Shadow, though I suspected it already had a name, probably several names from previous owners or caretakers. It accepted this designation with the same polite indifference it showed to everything else. The nightmares started in the second week. They were vivid and specific. Not the usual jumbled nonsense of dreams, but coherent narratives that felt more like memories than fabrications. In them, I was the cat. I felt fur where I should have felt skin, moved on 4 legs instead of 2. He saw the world from a perspective inches above the ground. And I was afraid, terribly, constantly afraid, of something large and cruel that meant me harm. In the dreams, there was a man. I could never see his face clearly, but I could feel his presence, sense his anger and casual cruelty. He kicked me when I got too close, threw things at me when I made noise, locked me in dark spaces for hours or days, ignoring my cries for food or water, or simple companionship. I would wake from these dreams disoriented and disturbed, my heart racing, my body tight with fear that belonged to someone, something else. And I would find Shadow sitting nearby, watching me with those gold, green eyes that seemed to hold more knowledge than any animal's eyes should contain. After one particularly bad night, I took Shadow to the veterinarian to be checked for a microchip, to see if I could track down its owner and return it to wherever it belonged. The vet, a kind woman in her 50s, ran the scanner over Shadow's neck and back, but found nothing. "No chip," she said, setting down the scanner. "How long have you had him?" "Just a couple weeks. He showed up in my backyard." She examined Shadow more closely, running her hands over his body, checking his teeth, looking in his ears. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. "He's older than he looks," she said finally. "Much older. And these scars." She parted the fur on Shadow's back, revealing patterns of scar tissue I'd never noticed. "These are old injuries. Systematic abuse, from the look of it. Someone hurt this cat, repeatedly, over a long period of time." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The dreams suddenly made terrible sense. They weren't just dreams. They were memories, Shadow's memories, somehow being shared with me during sleep, bleeding across the boundary that should have separated human consciousness from animal experience. "Is he healthy now?" I asked. "Physically, yes, but cats remember trauma. They remember who hurt them." She scratched Shadow behind the ears, and he tolerated it with his usual regal patience. "You're not the one who did this to him." "No. Never. I would never." "Good. Then take care of him. Give him the life he should have had." She paused, studying Shadow with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Though I should warn you, cats like this, cats that have suffered, sometimes they carry grudges. They remember the ones who hurt them, and they're more patient than people think. If this cat's previous owner ever crosses his path again, I wouldn't want to be that person." I took Shadow home and started paying more attention to his behavior. He was always watching, always tracking movements and sounds with intense focus. Sometimes he would sit by the window for hours, seemingly waiting for something or someone. Other times he would pace through the house, agitated, as if sensing a presence I couldn't detect. The nightmares continued and intensified. I began to see more of Shadow's past. The cold concrete of a basement where he'd been locked for days. The sting of objects thrown at him. The terror of being picked up by the scruff and carried roughly, painfully, to wherever his tormentor decided to put him. And through it all, I felt Shadow's growing anger, his deep and patient hatred for the person causing his suffering. Then the accident started. Small things at first. I tripped over nothing on the stairs, catching myself on the railing before I fell. A shelf fell off the wall in my office, missing my head by inches. The gas stove suddenly wouldn't turn off properly, filling the kitchen with fumes until I managed to shut off the main valve. I told myself these were coincidences, normal household mishaps that happened to everyone. But they kept happening, escalating in frequency and severity. A ladder I was standing on suddenly buckled, dropping me to the ground hard enough to knock the wind from my lungs. My car's brakes felt spongy one morning, barely responding when I pressed the pedal, forcing me to use the emergency brake to avoid running a red light. And through all of it, Shadow watched with those intelligent, knowing eyes. I started researching black cats and superstition, reading about their association with witchcraft and bad luck, their supposed supernatural abilities. The stories were consistent across cultures and centuries. Black cats were more than they appeared. They remembered everything. They could curse those who wronged them. They were patient in their vengeance, willing to wait years, decades even, for the perfect moment to exact revenge. I told myself this was nonsense, the kind of superstitious thinking humanity should have left behind centuries ago. Cats were animals, nothing more. They didn't have supernatural powers. They couldn't curse people or cause accidents through force of will. But the accidents kept happening. I came home one evening to find all the mirrors in my house cracked, each one fractured in a different pattern, as if something had struck them from the inside. Shadow sat in the living room, grooming himself calmly, surrounded by shattered reflections. "What did you do?" I asked, though I knew he wouldn't answer. Couldn't answer. He paused his grooming and looked at me with those unsettling eyes. And for just a moment, I could have sworn he smiled. Not a human smile, nothing so crude, but a subtle rearrangement of his features that conveyed satisfaction, pleasure, anticipation. That night, the nightmare was different. I was still the cat, still Shadow, but now I was watching someone, following them, waiting for the right moment. The person was familiar. Their walk, their build, the way they moved through the world with careless confidence. And I hated them with an intensity that transcended anything I'd felt in my human life. A pure and perfect hatred that had been refined by years of pain and fear into something almost beautiful in its single-minded focus. I woke up gasping, and Shadow was sitting on my chest, one paw resting gently on my throat. His weight wasn't threatening. He couldn't have weighed more than 10 pounds. But the symbolism was clear. He was showing me what he could do, demonstrating his power, reminding me that I was vulnerable in ways I'd never considered. "I didn't hurt you," I whispered. "I'm not the one you're looking for." Shadow tilted his head, considering. Then he stepped off my chest and moved to the foot of the bed, settling there to watch me for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep again. I couldn't, with those eyes on me, with that presence waiting. The next morning, I decided to find Shadow's previous owner. If the cat was somehow causing these accidents, if there was truth to the old superstitions about black cats and revenge, then I needed to understand what had happened to him, who had hurt him, and what he might be planning. I started with the local animal shelter, showing them a picture of Shadow and asking if anyone had reported a lost black cat matching his description. The woman at the desk scrolled through her computer, then froze. "This cat," she said slowly. "Are you sure this is him?" "Yes." "Why?" She turned her monitor so I could see. There was a picture of Shadow, or a cat that looked exactly like him, with a red DEC stamp across the file. This cat was brought in 3 years ago, she explained. Severe abuse case. The owner was arrested for animal cruelty, multiple counts. The cat had to be euthanized. Its injuries were too severe to treat. Internal damage, a broken bones that had healed wrong, infections. It was suffering. We couldn't save it. I stared at the screen, feeling that cold sensation spreading through my stomach again. What was the owner's name? She hesitated, then seemed to decide that I needed to know. Michael Reeves. He lived over on Elm Street, but he's not there anymore. After his arrest, he skipped town, disappeared before his court date. There's still a warrant out for him. What did he look like? She pulled up another file, showing me Michael Reeves's booking photo. He was in his 40s, heavy set, with small eyes, and a mean set to his mouth. I'd never seen him before, didn't recognize him at all. But something about his face triggered a memory, not one of mine, but one of Shadow's. I'd seen this face in my nightmares, looming over me, twisted with anger and contempt. This was the person who had tortured Shadow, who had broken and burned and starved him until the shelter had no choice but to end his suffering. This was the person Shadow had come back to find. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant and strange. "This is very helpful." I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I'd learned. The cat in my house couldn't be Shadow. The original Shadow had died 3 years ago. But if it wasn't the same cat, why did it look identical? Why did it carry the same scars, the same memories, the same consuming hatred for Michael Reeves? Unless it was the same cat. Unless something had allowed it to come back, to return from death with a purpose, with unfinished business, with a need for revenge that transcended the normal boundaries of life and death. I found Shadow waiting for me when I got home, sitting in his usual spot by the window. He turned to look at me as I entered, and I saw acknowledgement in his eyes. He knew that I knew. The pretense, if there had ever been one, was over. "You died," I said, though I felt foolish speaking to a cat about death and resurrection. "You died 3 years ago, and somehow you came back. You're looking for him, aren't you? For Michael Reeves." Shadow blinked slowly, a gesture that in cat language signifies trust and affection. But in this context, it felt more like confirmation. "And the accidents? You're practicing, aren't you? Learning what you can do, testing your abilities, preparing for when you find him." Another slow blink. "But why me? I didn't hurt you. I've been taking care of you, feeding you, giving you a home." A shadow stood and walked toward me, his movements liquid and purposeful. He rubbed against my leg, and I felt a sudden flood of images and emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also apology. He hadn't meant for me to be hurt. The accidents were just overflow. Practice gone slightly wrong. His power was still imperfect, still learning its boundaries. I was collateral damage in a revenge that had nothing to do with me. But the accidents would stop now. He had control. He knew what he was doing. And soon, very soon, Michael Reeves would return to town. Shadow could sense it somehow. Knew it with certainty. And then the real work would begin. I should have gotten rid of the cat right then. I should have taken him to a shelter 50 miles away, or driven him out to the country, and released him, or done anything to remove this instrument of supernatural vengeance from my life. But I didn't. Whether it was compassion for what Shadow had suffered, or morbid curiosity about what would happen next, or simple cowardice, I let him stay. The accidents did stop, just as Shadow had promised. My life returned to its normal rhythm: work, meals, sleep. The mundane maintenance of existence. Shadow continued to live in my house, but his focus had shifted. He was waiting now, conserving his energy, keeping watch with preternatural patience. 2 weeks passed, then 3. I began to think that maybe Shadow's sense of Michael Reeves's return had been wrong, that the man would never come back, that this strange chapter of my life would simply fade into memory. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I saw him. I was leaving the grocery store, loading bags into my car, when a familiar figure walked past me in the parking lot. Older than in his booking photo, thinner with grayer hair, but unmistakably Michael Reeves. He moved with the same careless confidence I'd seen in Shadow's memories. The posture of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his cruelty. I stood frozen, bags dangling from my hands, watching him get into a truck and drive away. My first instinct was to call the police. There was still a warrant for his arrest, after all. But something stopped me. Some knowledge, deep and certain, that this wasn't my justice to deliver. I drove home faster than I should have, my heart pounding, my hands tight on the wheel. Shadow was waiting by the door when I arrived, already knowing somehow what I'd seen. "He's back," I said unnecessarily. "He's here." Shadow's tail lashed once, the only outward sign of his excitement. Then he was moving, slipping out the door before I could stop him, disappearing into the twilight with purpose and direction. I should have let it go. I should have stayed home, called the police, let human law handle human crimes. But I couldn't. I needed to see what would happen. Needed to witness the conclusion of this impossible story I'd become part of. I followed Shadow's path through the neighborhood, tracking his small dark form as it moved with supernatural certainty toward its target. He led me through streets and alleys, across yards and through gaps in fences, until we reached a run-down house on the edge of town. Michael Reeves's truck sat in the driveway. Shadow paused at the property line, looking back at me. His eyes glowed in the deepening darkness, gold and green and something else, something that had nothing to do with reflected light. He was giving me a chance to leave, to turn away, to maintain my innocence in whatever was about to happen. I stayed. Shadow's form seemed to blur for a moment, becoming less distinct, more shadow than substance. Then he was moving again, slipping through the darkness toward the house, a piece of night given purpose and direction. I couldn't see what happened inside. I could only wait in the darkness beyond the property, watching the lit windows, listening to the sounds of the evening. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, from inside the house, I heard a shout, surprise more than fear, followed by a crash. The lights began to flicker. Not the normal flicker of electrical problems, but a purposeful strobing, on and off in a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. A window shattered, glass exploding outward. Another crash from inside, louder this time, and the house went completely dark. I heard footsteps running. Then the back door burst open, and Michael Reeves stumbled out, his face pale in the moonlight, his eyes wide with terror. He ran toward his truck, fumbling for his keys, and I saw shadow following, a darkness within the darkness, patient and inexorable. Reeves managed to get his door open and climbed inside, slamming it shut. The engine roared to life, and for a moment I thought he might escape, might drive away and leave Shadow's revenge unfinished. Then the truck lurched forward, accelerating wildly, and I realized Reeves wasn't in control. The steering wheel was turning on its own, guided by something I couldn't see. The truck veered off the driveway, crashed through a fence, and careened toward a large oak tree at the edge of the property. The impact was tremendous, metal crumpling and glass shattering. The truck's horn stuck, blaring into the night. Then silence, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the drip of fluids onto the ground. I approached slowly, knowing I should run, should call for help, should do anything other than move toward the wreckage. Through the spider, webbed windshield, I could see Michael Reeves slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and sitting on the hood of the truck, perfectly calm and composed, was Shadow. He was grooming himself, licking one paw and drawing it over his ear, the picture of feline nonchalance. When he saw me, he blinked once, slowly, then jumped down and walked away into the darkness. The police and ambulance arrived within minutes. Someone must have heard the crash and called 911. I watched from the shadows as paramedics extracted Reeves from the wreckage. He was alive. I could see him moving. But his eyes had a glazed, traumatized quality, as if he'd seen something that had broken something fundamental inside him. Later, I would learn that he was talking, babbling incoherently about a black cat, about eyes in the darkness, about feeling claws inside his mind, about the certainty that he was being repaid for every moment of suffering he'd caused. The doctors thought he had a head injury, that the trauma of the crash had caused hallucinations. They committed him for psychiatric evaluation. He would never leave that facility. Whatever Shadow had done to him, whatever supernatural revenge he'd enacted, had shattered Reeves's mind as thoroughly as Reeves had once broken Shadow's body. There was justice in that, I suppose. Symmetry. Shadow didn't come home that night, or the next night. I thought perhaps he'd moved on, his purpose fulfilled, his vengeance complete. I mourned his absence more than I expected, missing the quiet companionship of those weeks we'd shared, even knowing what he was, what he'd done. Then, 5 days after Michael Reeves's accident, I found Shadow sitting beneath the oak tree in my backyard, in the exact spot where he'd first appeared. He looked different somehow, lighter, less burdened, as if a weight had been lifted from him. I opened the back door and called to him, making those clicking sounds. He stood and walked toward me with movements that seemed less purposeful than before, more cat-like, more ordinary. When he reached the porch, he rubbed against my leg with genuine affection, the kind of simple animal gesture I'd never seen from him before. I picked him up, carefully, respectfully, and carried him inside. He settled immediately on the couch, curling into a tight ball, and began to purr. It was the first time I'd heard him make that sound. That night, I had no nightmares, no memories of abuse, no visions of suffering, no sense of borrowed hatred burning in my chest. I simply slept deeply and peacefully, and when I woke up, Shadow was still there, still purring, still present. The weeks that followed were remarkably normal. Shadow behaved like an ordinary cat, playing with toys, sleeping in sunbeams, demanding food at regular intervals. The intensity had gone from his eyes, replaced by the simple contentment of an animal that had found a safe home. No more accidents plagued my house. No more mirrors cracked. No more sense of lurking purpose or supernatural presence. I wanted to believe that Shadow had expended his supernatural energy on his revenge, that having achieved his purpose he'd reverted to being a normal cat. But sometimes, late at night, I would catch him sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness with an expression of intense focus. And I would wonder if there were others out there, other people who'd hurt him in his previous life, other debts to be collected, other revenges waiting to be enacted. Because that's the thing about cats. They remember everything, every kindness and every cruelty, every gentle touch and every blow. And black cats, according to the old stories, remember longest of all. They carry their grudges across death itself, patient and purposeful, waiting for the perfect moment to balance the scales. Michael Reeves still sits in that psychiatric facility, drawing pictures of black cats on every surface he can find, covering the walls of his room with crude sketches of gold, green eyes staring out of shadows. The staff thinks it's a manifestation of his trauma, a symbolic representation of his guilt. They don't know he's drawing from memory, capturing something he actually saw, something that came for him with supernatural patience and purpose. They don't know that the cat was real, that it died and came back, that it remembered, that it waited, that it took its revenge with the kind of precision and creativity that transcends normal animal intelligence. I know, though. I lived with it. I fed it. I shared its memories and felt its hatred and witnessed its vengeance. And I know that somewhere in the city, there might be others who hurt Shadow in his first life, who contributed to his suffering, who earned their places on a list of debts to be collected. Shadow lives with me still, a peaceful presence, a quiet companion. He sleeps on my bed and greets me at the door, and does all the normal things that cats do. But I pay attention to his moods, to the times when he sits by the window and watches the world with that old intensity. And when he asks to go out at night, I let him, knowing better than to try to keep him contained. Because I've learned what happens to people who hurt black cats, who dismiss them as simple animals, who underestimate their capacity for memory and patience and revenge. I've seen the cost of cruelty, witnessed the long reach of supernatural justice, and I've learned to be kind, always kind, because you never know when the cat you're mistreating might be something more than it appears. You never know when it might remember. You never know when it might decide to come back. Shadow is sleeping on the couch now, his chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths, his paws twitching in dreams that I hope are pleasant ones. He looks like any ordinary cat, nothing more than a small domesticated predator taking a nap in the afternoon sun. But I know better. I've seen what he is, what he can do, what he came back to accomplish. And I treat him with the respect that knowledge demands. Outside, the October wind rustles through the oak tree, carrying away the last of the summer's warmth. In a psychiatric facility across town, a broken man draws pictures of black cats and whispers apologies to ears that aren't there. In a house on Elm Street, investigators are still trying to explain the strange malfunctions that occurred before the accident. The flickering lights and shattered windows and sense of presence that multiple witnesses reported. They won't find answers. Some things transcend normal explanation, exist in the spaces between the natural and supernatural, between justice and revenge, between death and whatever comes after. Shadow stretches in his sleep, his claws extending briefly before retracting. He opens one eye, catches me watching him, and blinks slowly. That gesture of trust and affection that cats use with those they consider safe. I blink back, acknowledging the unspoken contract between us. I will feed him, shelter him, treat him with kindness and respect. And in return, he will not turn that patient, purposeful attention on me. It's a fair exchange. The best I could hope for, really. Having invited something ancient and vengeful into my home, having witnessed its power, having become complicit in its revenge. Shadow closes his eye and returns to sleep. The afternoon sun continues its path across my living room floor. The world outside continues its usual business, unaware of the supernatural forces that sometimes move through it, unaware of the old stories that turn out to be true, unaware of the patience of black cats who remember everything and forgive nothing. I return to my book, trying to focus on the words, trying to forget what I know. But I keep glancing at Shadow, at his peaceful form. at the slight smile that seems to play around his whiskers. And I remember that some debts take years to collect, that some cats are more than they appear, that some revenges are worth dying for, and worth coming back for. The old superstitions were right. Black cats bring bad luck, but only to those who deserve it. Story 8. I should have listened to the old groundskeeper when he told me never to walk through Ashwood Cemetery after midnight. But grief makes fools of us all, and I needed to feel close to her again, even if it meant wandering among the dead in the deepest hours of night. The iron gates groaned as I pushed them open, their sound like a voice warning me back. I ignored it. The moon hung low and swollen above the tombstones, casting everything in a pale, watery light that seemed to move and breathe. My footsteps on the gravel path were too loud, each crunch announcing my presence to whatever might be listening. Sarah's grave was in the old section, where the stones leaned at odd angles, and moss had long since claimed the carved names. I brought white roses, her favorite, though I knew they would wilt by morning. The air felt thick as I walked, pressing against my skin like invisible hands testing my resolve. That was when I first noticed them. The others, at first, I thought they were just shadows cast by the monuments, the way moonlight can play tricks on anxious minds. But shadows do not drift independently of their sources. They do not pause and turn as if considering you. They do not follow. I quickened my pace, clutching the roses tighter. The thorns bit into my palm, a small, sharp pain that felt reassuringly real. Sarah's grave was just ahead, marked by the angel statue with the missing wing. I could see its silhouette against the sky, but the shadows were multiplying now. I could sense them gathering at the edges of my vision, never quite there when I looked directly, but undeniably present. The temperature had dropped. My breath came out in small clouds, though it was August and the day had been sweltering. When I reached Sarah's grave, I knelt and placed the roses against the headstone. My fingers traced her name, carved deep into the marble. 3 months. It had only been 3 months, and already the world felt impossibly distant from the one we had shared. I miss you, I whispered. The words seemed to hang in the air, visible almost, like they had weight and substance. And then I heard it. A whisper in response. Not Sarah's voice. Many voices overlapping, creating a sound like wind through dead leaves. We miss it too. I froze. The shadows had drawn closer, forming a loose circle around me. Now that they were near, I could almost see shapes within them. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall, or too thin, or bent at angles that made my eyes water to follow. The warmth. Another voice whispered, this one closer to my left ear. The pulse. The sweet rhythm of living blood. I stood slowly, trying not to make sudden movements. The rational part of my mind screamed that I was having some kind of breakdown. That grief had finally cracked something essential in my psyche. But the roses in my hand were real. The cold was real. And the shadows were moving closer. We have been here so long, A different voice said, "This one thin and reedy, like air through a crack, waiting, watching. The living come and go, but they never stay. They never understand what we need. I should go." I managed to say, my voice embarrassingly small. The shadows rippled, and I had the distinct impression they were laughing. "Go where? You came to visit the dead, didn't you? Well, here we are. We have been so patient." One shadow detached from the others, gliding across the grass toward me with horrible smoothness. It had the suggestion of a face now, hollow eyes and a mouth too wide. As it approached, I felt something pulling at me like a current in deep water. Not physical exactly, but undeniable. "Just one moment," it whispered. "One moment inside. To remember what it was like. You would hardly notice. A slight confusion, perhaps. A forgotten hour. Is that so much to ask?" I stumbled backward, my heel catching on a grave marker. I fell, landing hard on my back. The breath knocked from my lungs. The shadows loomed over me now, blotting out the moon. I could feel them pressing down, searching for a way in, like fingers testing a locked door. "No," I gasped. "No, you can't." "But we can," the voices said in unison. "We have before. You have felt us already, haven't you? Those moments when you forget what you were saying. When you walk into a room and cannot remember why. When you look in the mirror and feel like you are seeing a stranger. Those cracks. Those little gaps. That is us trying to come home." The pulling sensation intensified. I felt something inside me loosening, like I was becoming untethered from my own body. The fear was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else. A terrible temptation. How easy it would be to just let go. To drift away from the pain of loss, the weight of grief. To become something else, something that did not hurt quite so much. "Sarah," I whispered, grasping for anything to hold on to. The shadows paused. The pulling sensation eased slightly. "She is not here," one of them said, and for the first time, there was something almost like pity in its voice. "The fresh dead do not stay in places like this. They move on quickly. While the moving is still easy, it is only the old ones, the forgotten ones, who linger, who fade, who become like us. Then where is she?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "Gone," it said simply. "Beyond reach, beyond return. But you could follow. Not as you are, but as we are, untethered, unbound. It would be a kind of peace." For a long moment, I considered it. The shadows waited, patient as stone. The moon continued its slow arc across the sky. Somewhere far away, a dog barked, the sound achingly normal. "No," I said finally, forcing myself to sit up. "No, I am not ready for that." The shadows drew back slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Not ready," they echoed. "Not yet. But someday. Everyone comes to us eventually. The cemetery is patient. We are patient." They began to disperse then, sliding back toward the tombstones, becoming one with the natural shadows again. But I could still feel them watching. Would always feel them watching now, I realized. I had seen them. I had heard them. That was a door that could not be fully closed. I stood on shaking legs and began walking back toward the gate. Each step felt like it took enormous effort, like I was moving through water. The path seemed longer than before, the tombstones multiplying in my peripheral vision. Was that one there before? Had that angel always been facing that direction? Halfway to the gate, I passed a mausoleum I did not remember seeing on my way in. Its door stood slightly ajar, and from within came a sound like breathing. Deep, slow, rhythmic breathing. I did not look closer. I did not investigate. I kept walking. The groundskeeper's cottage was dark as I passed it, but I could swear I saw the curtain twitch. He knew. He had always known. How many others had he warned? How many had ignored him as I had? The iron gates seemed heavier now, harder to push open. For a horrible moment, I thought they would not open at all, that I had taken too long, crossed some invisible threshold. But they groaned apart, and I slipped through, back into the world of streetlights and distant traffic sounds. I did not look back. That would have been a mistake. But as I walked home through the empty streets, I could feel something following me. Not the shadows themselves, not exactly, but the memory of them, the knowledge of them. They had touched something in me, and that touch had left a mark. At home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. My reflection looked normal. Same face, same eyes, same pale skin. But when I blinked, just for an instant, I thought I saw something else looking back at me. Something with hollow eyes and a mouth too wide. I turned off the light quickly. Now, 3 weeks later, I find myself thinking about the cemetery constantly, about the shadows and their patient waiting. I have not gone back, though I want to. That is what frightens me most, the want. I catch myself forgetting things more often now. Small things. Where I put my keys. What I had for breakfast. The names of people I have known for years. And sometimes, when I am standing still, I feel that pulling sensation again, like something is trying to unhook me from myself, like I am being tested from the inside. Last night, I dreamed I was walking through Ashwood Cemetery again. But in the dream, I was not alone in my body. I could feel others there with me, crowding in, sharing the space. And the strangest part was how natural it felt. How right. Like this was how things were always meant to be. When I woke up, my shoes were muddy. Grass stains on my knees. White rose petals scattered across my bedroom floor. I have not left the house since then. But I can feel them waiting. The shadows, the forgotten ones. They are patient, as they said, and I am becoming less certain, with each passing hour, of exactly who is looking out through my eyes, whether it is all me anymore, whether it ever will be again. The cemetery is patient. The shadows are patient, and I am so very, very tired of being afraid. Perhaps tonight I will walk back through those iron gates. Perhaps tonight I will stop fighting the pull. Perhaps tonight I will discover what it truly means to rest among the dead. Or perhaps I will wake up tomorrow morning, still myself, still whole, still fighting. I honestly cannot say, which outcome I hope for anymore. The line between is becoming so very thin.